Chapter 125. The Great Luo Empire was located in the eastern part of the Tian land. It was a middle-ranking empire with dozens of subordinate countries under its jurisdiction. It held a lofty position in the Tian land. Within the Great Luo Empire, there were many mountains that were rich in spiritual qi. Within these mountains, there were many hidden upper sky realm masters, forming various sects of various sizes. Old Man Ji-in of the Jian Mountain was one of the famous innate masters in the Great Luo Empire. He occupied the territory of the Jian Mountain and established his own sect, which was very prosperous. Old Man Ji-in had a treacherous personality, and he was a sinister and eccentric person. In the Great Luo Empire, he was a thorn that no one was willing to provoke. Even though this person's strength was formidable, what was even more terrifying was that he was sinister, vicious, and cunning. Once he made an enemy of another, he would stop at nothing, and he was like a parasite that wouldn't rest until he bit his enemy to death. Otherwise, he would absolutely not stop. Due to his vengeful personality, many sect leaders in the Great Luo Kingdom avoided him like the plague. They were not willing to deal with him at all. However, not wanting to deal with him did not mean that he could ignore his existence. In the depths of extreme Yin Mountain, outside of Old Man Ji-in's cultivation cave, a young man of about 30 years of age was anxiously pacing back and forth at the entrance of the cave. From time to time, he would look into the cave. Looking at his expression, he seemed to be waiting for someone. This young man was the eldest son of the Redwood King, He Yutian. He had been sent to train under Old Man Ji-in since he was young. The Redwood King's wish for him was to enter the innate realm. Becoming Old Man Ji-in's disciple was undoubtedly a great guarantee for him to enter the Xiantian realm. Although He Yutian had not entered the innate realm yet, Old Man Ji-in had promised that as long as the Redwood Mansion prepared 360 virgins who were born in the year of the 5th lunar month of the 5th lunar month of the 6th 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 lunar. After receiving such a promise, He Yutian naturally didn't dare to neglect it. All these years, he had been urging the Redwood Mansion to work hard to gather the girls that Old Man Jean needed. For so many years, the Redwood King had sent out a lot of powerful warriors, but it was still not an easy task to gather 360 virgins. Seeing that things were progressing in a favorable direction, he did not expect that Qin Wushuang would suddenly appear out of nowhere and ruin the Redwood King's recent plan. The Redwood King's new and old grudges overlapped. He wrote a letter and sent it to the Jian Mountain. When He Yutian saw the letter from his family, he was also quite anxious. However, his father had clearly stated in the letter that he had to ask his teacher, Old Man Ji-in, for help no matter what. Only Old Man Ji-in, a pre-celestial master, could solve this problem for the Redwood Mansion. He Yutian had always paid attention to the situation in the Bayou country. Of course, he knew that the winner of this exam was protected by the Martial Saint Mountain. Although the Redwood King was a feudal lord, they were not powerful enough to go against the Martial Saint Mountain. However, the Jian sect's involvement was completely different. Firstly, the Great Luo Empire was the sovereign country of the Bayou country. In the Great Luo Empire, although the Jian sect was not the most powerful sect, it was at least one of the top sections. If a large sect from a suzerain country wanted to kill a young man from a subordinate country, even if they acted first and reported later, no one would be able to do anything to them. Although the Great Luo Empire placed great importance on this trial, it was unrealistic to fall out with the Jian sect just for the champion of a middle-ranked subordinate kingdom. At most, the champion of a middle-ranked subordinate country was a young man with upper sky potential. However, the Jiin sect was a sect that had many elite upper sky warriors. Of course, everyone knew who was more important and who was more important. From the letter, He Yuqian could clearly read the intense anger inside his father's heart. In fact, even without his father's persuasion, He Yuqian's anger was no less than his father's after he had finished reading the letter. This Qin Wushuang had destroyed the Redwood King's business. Indirectly, it was the same as destroying his upper sky plan. Entering the upper sky was a dream that He Yuqian had harbored since he could remember. In these 20 or 30 years of hard work, he had racked his brains for this dream. Even in his dreams, he had pondered over this matter. It had completely become a knot in his heart, or even a demon in his heart. Now, someone had interfered with his upper sky plan. How could he not hate him to the bone? If He Yuqian had enough confidence to deal with Qin Wushuang, most likely he would have returned to the Bayou country and killed his way to the Heavenly Royal Territory. Although the Redwood King could not deal with the Heavenly Royal Territory, it did not mean He Yuqian could not. Currently, he was a disciple of the Jiin sect. When he returned to the Bayou country, a subordinate country of the Great Luo Empire, his identity was completely different. It was equivalent to representing both the Great Luo Empire and the Jiin sect. However, He Yuqian had not stepped into the upper sky. What qualifications did he have to deal with Qin Wushuang? That Qin Wushuang, his father had made it clear in the letter. He did not know what kind of luck this kid had had. At such a young age, he had reached Stage 9 of the genuine force and would not lose to any of the Stage 9 elite warriors from the Redwood King's mansion. With his strength, it was no wonder that he had gotten first place in the exam and had taken away the exam that his third brother, He Yuqian, had coveted for a long time. Currently, He Yuqian was extremely anxious. Just when he was considering if he should come back in the afternoon, an old voice came from inside the cave. Yuqian, come in. It was the voice of his teacher, Old Man Jiin. Overjoyed, He Yuqian immediately went in. It's my honor to meet you, teacher. No need to be so courteous. Old Man Jiin was hidden in the darkness. His face could not be seen at all. It was as if there was only a voice in the darkness talking to He Yuqian. There was no living person at all. Then, Old Man Jiin asked with an indifferent tone, has the new batch of virgins arrived? He Yuqian's forehead was covered with sweat. He hurriedly knelt down. Teacher, your disciple is guilty. Old Man Jiin snorted. His tone suddenly changed. What? You can't even handle such a small matter? Then why do you still hope to enter the upper sky every day? He Yuqian hurriedly explained. Teacher, please listen to my explanation. Old Man Jiin coldly said, don't use those childish excuses to fool me. Otherwise, your explanation will make your crime even worse. Your disciple would never dare to deceive or fool you, teacher. He Yuqian tried to control his emotions. Then, he began to tell the whole story. Teacher, my father had a great harvest this month. He had found 7 or 8 suitable virgins. However, a monstrous young man appeared out of nowhere and caused the plan to fail. Those virgins were also completely released by him. Monstrous young man? Old Man Jiin snorted coldly. Since when could your Redwood mansion not even take care of a young man? Could a little Bayou country really have some monstrous young man? Teacher, you said that in the Bayou country, in a few short years, an offspring of the humble class had risen to number 1 in the martial arts student exam, obtained the seat of the royal family, and reached Stage 9 of the genuine force. Does this count as a monstrous young man? Stage 9 of the genuine force. From the tone of Old Man Jiin, there was a trace of disbelief. Are you sure your information is correct? I can guarantee with my life that this is absolutely correct. That kid was extremely daring and dared to ruin your plans. He had offended the Jiin sect. Teacher, for such a rebellious disciple, please tell me how to deal with him. That kid had just entered the royal family and was extremely arrogant. Plus, he was protected by that upper sky warrior from the Marshall Saint Mountain in the Bayou country. Indeed, he was insufferably arrogant. He Yuqian's tone was full of unwillingness. Inwardly, He was harboring the idea of provoking old man Jiin. He knew his teacher's personality. He hated it when others offended the dignity of the Jiin sect. He had deliberately mentioned the Upper Sky warrior from the Martial Saint Mountain in the Bayou country to provoke old man Jiin. It was because old man Jiin was extremely arrogant and never cared about other Upper Sky warriors. Indeed, after hearing his words, old man Jiin only sneered coldly. He was a cunning old fox. How could he not understand what He Yutian meant? However, it was one thing to hear it, but whether or not he could tolerate it was another matter. Now, it was a crucial moment for him to practice an Upper Sky evil technique. These virgins from different places were the necessary supplements for him to practice his evil technique. Once the supplies were cut off, for sure, his training progress would slow down. This was something he could not tolerate the most. After a moment of thinking, old man Ji-in came up with a plan. He waved his hand and threw out a Ji-in command plate. Take this Ji-in command plate to your senior brother's cave and tell him that it is my order. Ask him to go to the Bayou country. Whoever dares to stop my sex business, they must die. Overjoyed, Hiyuchin took this Ji-in command plate. Just when he was about to leave the cave, suddenly, he remembered something and asked respectfully, "What if that person from the Martial Saint Mountain stops me? Your senior brother's strength is no less than that person from the Martial Saint Mountain. Tell your senior brother, if that person from the Martial Saint Mountain wants to stand out, in 3 months, I will go to the Martial Saint Mountain and take his head." Yes. Hiyuchian was 100% satisfied with this result. How could Hiyuchian not be overjoyed when he received his teacher's promise? He walked out of the cave and sneered. He could not help but laugh to the sky to vent the anger in his chest. He weighed the Ji-in command plate in his hand and walked towards his senior brother's cave in high spirits. Almost at the same time, the Emperor of the Great Luo was flipping through the martial arts student exam results from each subordinate countries. Among them, some had disappointed him, and some had been within his expectations. Of course, there were also some that he had not expected. For example, the Bayou country. Among the dozens of subordinate countries in the Great Luo Empire, this middle-ranking subordinate country was neither outstanding nor backward. However, for a few hundred years, it had always been unknown and had never been in the limelight. However, this time, this Bayou country had surprised him. Among the 10 middle-ranking subordinate countries, this Bayou country that had always been ranked at the bottom had come out on top. Their results were almost on par with those upper-ranking subordinate countries. This is an unexpected surprise. The Emperor of the Great Luo Empire said to the leader of the guards next to him with a smile, "Bayou country? Yes. When has this Bayou country ever had such glory? Especially this martial arts student who had won the championship. He had the highest result in this exam, including all the disciples of the Great Luo and all the subordinate countries. None of them had done better than him in the same exam content. 600 points. I am truly surprised by this result. How could it be the result of a martial arts student from a middle-ranking subordinate country?" As the Emperor of the Great Luo Empire, he had seen many geniuses. What kind of martial arts student could make the Emperor sigh with emotion? The leader of the guards on the side could not help but feel curious. P.S. Sorry, I'm a little late for tonight's update. My son is a little naughty tonight. This kid is not as obedient as before since it's almost the end of the week. Haha, there's one more update. I will get in an hour. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chijian.com. More chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 126. Commander AO, I need to submit these results as soon as possible. The higher-ups have already urged me a few times. The Emperor mumbled to himself and closed the results files from each subordinate country. After a moment, he could not help but take out the file from the Bayou country. Once again, he could not help but feel amazed as he thought back to it. The Stargaze Palace was the supreme authority in the Great Luo Empire and unquestionably the #1 powerhouse. Its position was as supreme as the Zhen Wu holy place in those subordinate countries. Among the subordinate countries, they were established with martial arts. Basically, Stage 9 of the genuine force was the peak. Thus, it was named the Zhenwu Holy Place. However, in an empire like the Great Luo, the powerhouses behind the royal family were, of course, at the spiritual martial force. And the Stargaze Palace was the undisputed leader among the many spiritual martial force powerhouses in the Great Luo. When the Stargaze Palace commanded the entire country, regardless of how rebellious you were, you must obey their orders. In the Great Luo Empire, whoever went against the will of the Stargaze Palace would be digging their own grave. Currently, outside the Stargaze Palace, the representatives from the royal family were waiting respectfully. They were here to deliver the results files. However, the Stargaze Palace had their own set of rules. Even if they were from the royal family, they must act according to their rules. No one dared to overstep their boundaries. After a moment, a man in white walked out from the palace and said leisurely, "Commander Ao, the palace masters are all in solitary training. I will take the files for them." This man in white did not wear his clothes casually. Instead, he wore them with great care. In the Stargaze Palace, there was a strict hierarchy. Different positions and duties would all wear different outfits. Clearly, this man in white was one of the 10 palace emissaries from the Stargaze Palace. The 5 palace masters all wore golden robes. Only, the robes were embroidered with different patterns according to their positions. Below the palace masters, there were the 8 Shakyamuni who wore purple robes. Below the Shakyamuni, there were the elders who wore bright red robes. Although the position of these palace emissaries was one level lower than the elders, they were all young and promising elite warriors with great potential. They were also the main targets to be nurtured by the Stargaze Palace. Thus, their position in the Stargaze Palace would not be lower than the elders. In many cases, they were even higher than the elders. Vividly, they were qualified to sit on par with the 8 Shakyamuni. Among the thousands of disciples in the Stargaze Palace, only 10 were chosen to become palace emissaries. Unless there was a death or injury, no one would be able to fill the quota. The palace emissaries were usually the representatives of the 5 great palace masters. Replacing the 5 Great Hall Masters to receive people was also a form of training and training. Commander Ao was obviously aware of the identity of the palace emissary, so he carefully handed over the result file. After verifying it, he didn't dare to stay any longer and asked to leave. That man in white did not send him off. He said a few words of courtesy and entered the Stargaze Palace with the scrolls. The 5 Hall Masters were obviously not in seclusion. It was just a minor character like Commander Ao. There was no need for the Hall Masters to personally welcome him. The dossier was delivered to the head Hall Master. The head Hall Master flipped through it one by one. At first, there was no special expression on his face as he read through it one by one. Suddenly, the head Palace Master raised his crimson eyebrows and let out a sigh. The other Palace Masters were all curious. With the head Palace Master's personality, what could he have seen that would cause him to make such a sound? "Lord Hall Master, what is so interesting? Can you share with us?" "Yes, could it be there are some new things in this martial arts student exam?" Each of these 5 Palace Masters were elite warriors. Each of them was an Upper Sky Realm warrior and had seen a lot of things. In fact, they did not have much appetite for small dishes like the martial arts student exam. Only they had no choice but to do this martial arts student exam. Currently, under the rule of the Great Luo Empire, the number of talents was decreasing year by year. It had caused the Stargaze Palace to run out of talent. Thus, they had to secretly instruct the royal family of the Great Luo Empire to organize a martial arts student exam across the entire country. They would select talents from all over the country. Being the mountain behind the Great Luo Empire, of course, the Stargaze Palace could not step out. Or else, it would give people a feeling of lacking confidence. As the number 1 powerhouse in the Great Luo Empire, it would be too much of a joke if they relied on selecting talents to inject new blood. Thus, the initiator of this exam was the Great Luo Empire. The other powerhouses also did not know that the Stargaze Palace was behind this. It was no wonder that Old Man Jean dared to act so presumptuously and threw out the Ji'in commanding plate to let his head disciple go to the Bayou country to kill people. From Old Man Ji Yin's information, the origin of this exam was only the royal family of the Great Luo Empire. There are no traces of a Stargaze palace. Regarding the royal family of the Great Luo Empire, Old Man Ji-in was fearless. However, if he knew that the Stargaze Palace was behind this exam, then most likely he would have to think twice before sending out that Ji-in commanding plate. Most likely, he would not dare to act recklessly in fear of breaking the vases. For sure, the Stargaze Palace was an existence that the Ji-in sect could not afford to offend. Have you heard of the Bayou country? The head palace master asked without thinking. Bayou country? Isn't that one of the subordinate countries under the Great Luo Empire? I remember it's a middle-ranking subordinate country. However, it seems that they're not very prominent and are the type that is hard to find among the crowd. The head palace master laughed leisurely. This time, we can find them among the crowd. Oh, head palace master, what do you mean? The head palace master said meaningfully, if they did not falsify their results, then the Bayou country will no longer be a middle-ranking subordinate country. They will be replaced by an upper subordinate country. Good results? Head palace master, tell us, don't keep us in suspense. The head palace master laughed. Although their overall results were the best among all the middle-ranking subordinate countries, it was not too exaggerated. They were barely on par with those upper subordinate countries. However, in terms of individual results, one martial arts student from the Bayou country stood out like a crane among chickens. Guess, how many points did he get? How many? 400? 400? It seems that there are only 2 or 3 disciples from the Great Luo Empire, right? The head palace master shook his head with a smile. If it was 400 points, although it's already good, it would not be considered a crane among chickens. Think about it. If a crane were to stand among the chickens, how much taller would it be? Could be 500 points? It's impossible, right? 500 points, according to our prediction of the exam, it's impossible to appear. Even if the strongest stage 9 of the genuine force from the secular world were to participate in the martial arts student exam, he could suppress them with his strength. However, to get the J plate with 500 points, he would need to rely on luck. Yes, 500 points. At that age, it's impossible for a martial arts student to be so monstrous. The other palace masters all shook their heads and looked at the head palace master with eager eyes. They waited for him to solve the mystery. The head palace master said leisurely, "Indeed, it's not 500 points. However, you guys did not guess too high, but too reserved. That martial arts student's result was 600 points. 600 points? The other palace masters were dumbfounded and looked at the head palace master with an exaggerated expression. The head palace master knew it was somewhat strange. There were many historical records of the martial arts student exam within the Great Luo Empire. Historically, the highest result was only close to 500 points. It was unknown how far away he was from 600 points. Knowing that everyone would not believe him, the head palace master threw the scroll from his hand. That scroll seemed to have been bestowed with life. It was dragged by a wave of invisible power and floated before each palace master. When they took a look, those palace masters still could not let go of their shock. These upper sky realm warriors had seen a lot. However, they could not help but feel somewhat surprised when they saw such unprecedented news. Head palace master, such talent. Yes, for such talent, we cannot let him waste his youth in a place like the Bayou country. It's better to poach him. Haha. Everyone, I haven't accepted any disciples for many years. For this little guy, called Qin Wushuang, I think everyone should stop fighting with me? It was the third palace master's smiling voice. Third palace master, you still have the nerve to say that you haven't accepted any disciples for a few years? In the past, when you picked disciples lined up for you to pick, you were picky and did not take a fancy to any of them. That's because you had high standards. It's inappropriate for you to complain now that you didn't accept any disciples. That's right, it's still my branch. There are too few good seedlings. Head palace master, for this Qin Wushuang, no matter what, I must give him to me. This was the fifth palace master's complaint. The second palace master was older and more mature. However, it did not mean that he did not have the intention to hunt for talents. Naturally, He did not want to fall behind when he saw everyone fighting with vigor. He also opened his mouth to speak. When it comes to accepting disciples, it must be my branch. Third, you are too picky. Most likely, when the good seedlings reach your branch, you will torture them until they become useless. Fifth, when the good seedlings reach your branch, the success rate is too low. Second Palace Master, you shouldn't insult people like this, right? Those two Palace Masters who have been called out both opened their mouths to protest. Regarding the position in the Stargaze Palace, besides the head Palace Master, the other 4 Palace Masters were on par with each other. No one would give way to the other. That third Palace Master was an elite warrior with a cold face. However, he did not compete. Instead, he poured cold water on them. Each of you are fighting with such vigor. That Qin Wushuang did have a high exam result. However, who can guarantee that it was not due to luck? And as for his exact talent, it's another story. Then, he felt that it was not enough to vent his anger as he added, "Anyways, you can fight if you want, I am not interested." Regardless of how good a seedling from a subordinate country is, there is a limit to his potential. Regardless of how good a seedling is, can he compare to the natural spiritual roots? Ha ha ha! Natural spiritual roots. That second Palace Master did not agree. Third, do you think that the natural spiritual roots are like cats or dogs that you can get? That kind of exceptional genius can only be found by chance. One after another, everyone had different opinions. However, there was no final decision. Suddenly, the head Palace Master nodded and mumbled to himself. "That's how it should be. What do you think, head Palace Master?" The head Palace Master said with a cautious tone, "Regardless of that Qin Wushuang's talent, we must ensure that he will not be poached by other empires. If we let his results spread out, in less than a month, other powerhouses from other empires will come to poach him. Thus, before the second exam, we must send people to stabilize the situation and prevent outsiders from poaching him." Who should we send? Each of those Palace Masters was eager to give it a try. They wanted to volunteer to send their most trusted disciples. To prevent internal conflicts, we will not send any of your disciples. Send a palace emissary. After the head Palace Master had made up his mind, he immediately sent out the order. Send Emissary Liu, who is ranked 6th, to the Bayou country immediately. Bring Qin Wushuang to the Stargaze Palace ahead of time. If other empires try to poach him, the Stargaze Palace will meet all of their conditions double. Author's note: we will stop here today and continue tomorrow. I have created a VIP group for VIP readers to communicate with each other. Those interested VIP readers who have subscribed to this book, you can join. The group number is 312899092. You can also copy the group number from the introduction of the book. Please understand that you need to verify if you want to join the group. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 127. The martial arts student exam was in June, and the promotion to the royal family was in July. And Qin Xiu's wedding was in August. In these few months, the Qin family had been filled with joyous events. Before the wedding, Qin Wushuang had been training hard every day. Now, all the big and small matters in the family had been carried out in an orderly manner. There was no need to worry too much. And the 3 groups of guard from the Qin manor had also become Qin Lianshan's personal bodyguards. The army that belonged to the royal Qin family had already started to gather soldiers from all over the territory. The 2 states that belonged to the heavenly royal territory had always been rich and had a dense population. In total, there were about 60 or 70 million people. Qin Wushuang would rather go without than have something substandard. Thus, he only collected 100,000 people. At the same time, the royal Qin family had sent out a talent-seeking order to the entire country to recruit elite warriors to apply for various military and political positions. In a newly built royal territory, although the positions of the state and county officials would not change, the army would be built from scratch. All the positions in the army would be empty, and naturally, the royal mansion would need more elite warriors to fill the empty spots. After all, a royal mansion was completely different from the Qin manor in the past. When Qin Wushuang recruited the head of the internal guards, the first requirement was loyalty. The second was strength. This time, the royal Qin family's talent-seeking order had broken the rules of the Bayou country. It did not stick to one pattern. It did not look at family background or social status. As long as they were loyal, even those with weak strength could enter the royal mansion to further their training. With the recent reputation of the royal Qin family, they were like the sun in the sky. Of course, there were endless numbers of applicants. Since it did not matter family background, this way, many martial artists from the humble class or even from the civilians had developed a great interest and came to seek shelter. Apparently, those people from the civilian background had too few opportunities to stand out. Now, with such a great opportunity, of course, they had come from far away to give it a try. Xi Ming was in charge of the first round of selection. Qin Wushuang was in charge of the second round of selection. Qin Wushuang had lived 2 lifetimes. From the appearance and image, especially from the eyes, he had a way of judging people. After Qin Wushuang's screening, it was almost guaranteed that there would be no mistakes. After that, Qin Wushuang divided the selected experts into different tiers based on their bone frames, potential value, and loyalty. This was also very conducive to the formation of different talent echelons, thus forming a perfect talent system. Currently, the royal Qin family lacked talents the most. In the blink of an eye, it was almost time for Qin Xiu and Xi Ming's wedding. The Zhenwu holy place obviously attached great importance to this matter as well. Although only the purple-robed great venerate had come this time, he had come as a witness to the wedding. It was evident that the Zhenwu holy place attached great importance to the emerging kings with different surnames. And the emperor of the Bayou country did not hesitate. He waved his imperial brush and bestowed Xi Ming with the title of Count Luo River. His title was only 1 level lower than Qin Wushuang. This way, Xi Ming's status had also risen. On the wedding day, the major families of the heavenly royal territory could not help but use this opportunity to show their loyalty to the royal Qin. Although the Shimin feudal lords felt complicated, they could only rejoice inwardly before the general situation. It was a wise decision to cancel the marriage with the venerable Shi family. Or else, could the Shimin feudal lords have come to the wedding in peace? It was definitely an unknown factor. When he remembered Qin Wushuang's methods, Shiminyu also felt waves of lingering fear. On the other hand, inside the Redwood Mansion, the Redwood King sat upright and still with a joyful smile on his face. It was because he had received information from the Jiyin Mountain from the mother country. Old man Jiyin had already sent out the Jiyin order and sent his head disciple, Li Wuji. He would arrive at the Bayou country in a few days. The Redwood King calculated with his fingers that Li Wuji should arrive before Qin Xiu's wedding. In that case, when the royal Qin family was celebrating, how happy would it be if a fiend appeared and slaughtered the entire family? Because of this thought, the Redwood King felt that regardless, he should attend this wedding. He wanted to see with his own eyes the bloody scene of the Qin family being slaughtered by a fiend. This way, he would feel the thrill of revenge. Only then would he be able to hit a dog when it is down. Fei, this time you will come with me, the Redwood King said. He Yufei, who was on the side, had been in a gloomy mood for a few days after Qin Wushuang had let him go. Finally, he had regained his senses during this time. However, a wave of haze lingered in his heart. He did not know what this haze meant. However, he was almost certain that it would not be anything good. Thus, he was somewhat worried inwardly. Hearing the Redwood King's instruction, He Yufei immediately said, "Of course, I will go with you. That Qin Wushuang tortured me. This time, I must see with my own eyes how the Jiyin sect slaughters his entire family. Or else, how can I vent my anger? The Qin family. They are destined to be a shooting star. Although they will shine for a moment, it will not last long." The Redwood King stood up leisurely, passed down the order to prepare a generous gift. "We will go to the Qin family to celebrate the wedding and the funeral." "Yes, father." He Fei also smiled eagerly. On the Martial Saint Mountain, the Martial Saint sat on top of the tallest Xian stone and comprehended the power of the upper sky. The martial saint had entered the upper sky realm for almost 100 years. However, he could not break into the initial stage. Although his body had been trained to bear 20% of the natural power, he could not merge with this 20%. He also did not have enough control to unleash this 20% of natural power. Thus, he had stopped at this step and could not enter the middle stage. However, even though he was the martial saint of the Bayou country, it did not affect his authority. In the Bayou country, there was no one in the upper sky realm. The martial saint was the only one. However, in these few days, his upper sky realm chi kept fluctuating inexplicably. There was a strong sense of excitement, as if it was resonating with something. Could it be? Another upper sky realm has appeared in the Bayou country? Inwardly, the martial saint had also thought about this possibility. However, from his information, currently, no one in the Bayou country could enter the upper sky realm. It was because he had not discovered anyone who had completed all the steps before the upper sky realm. Everything was ready. Among the 4 great honored warriors under his command, the purple-robed great honored warrior had the most hope. However, due to his old age, his vitality and other aspects could not reach the peak of his body when he was young. Thus, the purple-robed great honored warrior needed more luck to break into the upper sky realm, and the possibility of such luck appearing was next to none. As for the others, their chances were even slimmer than the purple-robed great honored warrior. For this exam's champion, Qin Wushuang, he had great hope and potential. However, apparently, he lacked sufficient knowledge and a systematic understanding of the upper sky realm. In a short time, it would be impossible for him to break into the upper sky realm. Unless a miracle happened and a miraculous power from the outside, it would be possible for him to shed his mortal body and enter the upper sky realm. However, such fortune would never appear in a country like the Bayou country that did not have enough spiritual chi. In the Bayou country, the place with the most abundant spiritual chi and the best chance to nurture an upper sky realm was the martial saint mountain under his control. It was also the reason why the martial saint wanted to keep Qin Wushuang at the martial saint mountain. He did not wish for Qin Wushuang to take too many detours on the path to the upper sky realm. Everything has its pros and cons. Qin Wushuang did not agree to enter the martial saint mountain. It might not be a good thing, but it might not be a bad thing either. Perhaps there will be better opportunities waiting for him in the future. With his talent and potential, it's entirely possible for him to be chosen by the major sects of the mother country. As the martial saint thought about it, suddenly, he raised his eyebrow. That's right, his upper sky chi had moved again. And this time, it was even more obvious and direct. An elite warrior of the upper sky realm has intruded into my Bayou country. Immediately, the martial saint made such a judgment. He could clearly sense that this was a very distinct Xiantian chi. Although he could sense it from afar, he could feel that this wave of upper sky chi was not concealed at all. It seemed to be deliberately provoking him as it urged the upper sky chi without restraint. Inwardly, the martial saint was shocked. Could it be the martial saint of the great Wu has come to provoke me? As soon as he thought about it, he immediately denied it. He had met the martial saint of the great Wu, and they had exchanged upper sky chi. It would not have been like this. Besides, the martial saint of the great Wu would never be this overbearing. This was a wave of undisguised provocation. Apparently, it was to tell him that he was also an upper sky and that he had come to his country. The martial saint frowned tightly and mumbled to himself, I am afraid that the Bayou country will not have peace when an upper sky warrior enters the country. No, I must investigate this person's whereabouts. Just when he was about to leave the mountain, suddenly, the martial saint was stunned again. This time, he felt it even more strongly. That wave of upper sky chi was circling around the martial saint mountain. This was a provocation, an absolute provocation. The martial saint was enraged. Regardless of where you came from in the Bayou country, since you dared to act so presumptuously around the martial saint mountain, it meant that you did not put him, the martial saint, in your eyes. He rushed out of the Martial Saint Palace in a few steps and saw the disciples of the Martial Saint Mountain and the three honored warriors looking at each other in dismay. Apparently, they had also felt that wave of powerful upper sky chi. This wave of chi was extremely invasive and made each of these elite warriors who had not entered the upper sky realm feel an enormous pressure. Each second was torture. The Martial Saint gave a clear whistle. This whistle seemed to be able to purify the air. After this whistle, all the worries, uneasiness, and impatience had been dispelled. Before these disciples could react, the Martial Saint had already dashed down the mountain towards that upper sky realm warrior. When he arrived at the foot of the mountain, the Martial Saint stopped abruptly. He could feel the powerful upper sky chi at the scene. However, it was left behind. Apparently, this person had also sensed the Martial Saint's presence and did not want to meet him face to face. Thus, he had left behind traces of provocation and left early. The Martial Saint looked forward with confusion. Inwardly, a trace of an ominous feeling emerged. Since this upper sky realm warrior had acted so presumptuously, clearly, he was not just passing by. He had deliberately come to cause trouble. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 128. The Martial Saint pondered in his heart. If the Martial Saints of the surrounding vassal states came to visit, they would definitely have a visiting card or something. Vassal states of the same level could not be so disrespectful, unless the two countries are at war. Now, there is no war in the Bayou country. Then, thinking of a certain possibility, the Martial Saint's heart moved. Could it be an innate rancor from the suzerain state? Or even an innate rancor from an enemy country of the great Luo Empire? His intuition as an innate expert made him realize that the visitor did not come with good intentions. That person had clearly entered the country with obvious hostility. Who were they targeting? Assassinate the Emperor of the Bayou? Or to deal with him? A Xiantian Martial Saint? No matter what the situation was, as a Xiantian Martial Saint, he was duty-bound and could not stand by and do nothing. Since the other party had sent out innates, then the solution would definitely be from innates. If he, the Martial Saint, did not step out, no one in the Bayou country could defeat that upper sky warrior. Wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted in the Bayou country? However, after that person had left his innate chi at the foot of the Martial Saint Mountain, he had completely concealed his innate chi, suppressing it to the point where it was impossible to detect. In other words, that person was very cunning. After showing off his strength, he did not leave behind any traces at all. He did not allow a Xiantian Martial Saint like him to follow him. In the Redwood Palace, the Redwood King had already prepared a secret room for Li Wuji to rest. When Li Wuji received his master's old man Ji Yin's Jiyin command, he was also extremely angry. First of all, he held his master in high esteem. If someone dared to ruin his master's plans, as the eldest disciple, his face would also not look good. Second of all, for him to come all the way to a subordinate country was also a waste of his cultivation time. Therefore, he had accumulated a bellyful of anger. He was only waiting to go to the Qin family and slaughter them, then return to the Ji Yin sect in triumph. The Redwood King sensed the powerful aura of an innate rancor and carefully attended to him. He personally inquired about his well-being and served him well. Not to mention that the person in front of him was from a sect in his sovereign country. Just based on his innate status and aura, a prince from a subordinate country had no right to put on airs. There was a fine line between innate stage and acquired stage. However, this line cut off the possibility of thousands of martial artists advancing a step further. This was the difference between heaven and earth. In the secular world, there were many experts who had reached stage 9 of the true martial realm. However, those who could truly enter the Xiantian realm were hard to come by. Li Wuji's face was gloomy as he asked coldly, "Redwood King, when do you plan to leave?" "Young Master Li, I intend to set off tomorrow." "Okay, you lead the way first. I'll just follow your orders." The Qin family is preparing for the wedding. right? It just so happens that there are a lot of people. Let's kill to our heart's content. Exactly. But what? Li Wuji's tone carried a hint of displeasure. Only, I still need to stay in the Bayou country for a long time. When young Masterly kills people, please don't expose me. The Redwood King said carefully. Li Wuji sneered. I'm just going to kill. I don't want to talk nonsense. Hearing his words, the Redwood King felt slightly relieved. In that case, he could relax and watch the show. Recalling the scene of an innate rancor slaughtering in the Qin Manor, the Redwood King felt an indescribable pleasure in his bones. His blood was about to boil. At night, the martial saint's mood was not calm at all. He could not calm down. Instead, he initiated the upper sky chi with all his strength to feel the subtle movements. He must sense the location of that upper sky realm warrior. Only then, he could determine his whereabouts. Suddenly, the martial saint's heart skipped a beat. Vividly, he felt a trace of movement. It came from east of the Bayou country, Prince Akaji. Prince Akaji? The martial saint's mind spun quickly, and he immediately thought of something. Instantly, a name emerged in his head. Qin Wushuang. Could it be he was targeting Qin Wushuang? When he thought here, the martial saint could no longer sit still. If he was targeting Qin Wushuang, he was only here to poach him. Or, he was here to deal with Qin Wushuang. He would not allow either of these two situations to happen. The results of the martial arts student exam had already been sent to the higher-ups. If an accident happened, it would be a devastating blow to the Bayou country. It would not matter if they lost the opportunity to become an upper subordinate country. However, to the Bayou country, if they could not answer to the higher-ups, it would most likely be an abyss of eternal damnation. He must stop the other party. When he thought here, the martial saint gathered all his disciples and ordered, during this time, all disciples of the martial saint mountain are to train in isolation. If any external forces invade, or if there's an upper sky realm warrior, retreat. No one is allowed to fight. All the disciples agreed. After the martial saint finished his instructions, he floated down the mountain. He rushed towards the direction of Prince Akaji. Along the way, he must suppress his upper sky realm presence. Or else, if the other party sensed his approach, something might happen. Before the cave on the cliff of the Great Song Mountain, Qin Wushuang arrived as promised each day. To Qin Wushuang, this period of time was very fulfilling. Every day, he would go to that cave on the cliff and meditate. Vividly, Qin Wushuang felt a subtle sense of nature. It was an indescribable and mysterious feeling. It was a feeling that came from nature. Perhaps this is the upper sky realm that the martial saint mentioned? Qin Wushuang still found it hard to believe, because he knew from the martial saint that if he wanted to enter the upper sky realm, he must go through the process of breaking through. However, he had never gone through the process of breaking through. Upper sky realm? Qin Wushuang silently chewed. His palms faced the sky, and his 5 fingers were slightly raised. He felt the mysterious situation of this week. At this time, Qin Wushuang's body had completed a few circulations. It was as if there was a mysterious force in his body that was ready to burst out at any time. This force was different from internal strength. It was different from any force in the past. It was also not the sun flame chi, nor any other martial arts. It was a force that was naturally generated. It was as if a monster that had been sleeping in his body had suddenly awakened. It was jumping around and wreaking havoc in his body. It was like a wild horse, constantly struggling to break free from the restraints of the reins. Qin Wushuang subconsciously pointed the middle finger of his right hand forward. Chi! A sharp sound broke through the air. It was as shrill as the cry of an owl as it shot out. It was accompanied by a red light that was almost visible to the naked eye. It shot forward. Boom! This red light shot out. Coincidentally, a group of bats was fluttering in front of it. This red light broke through the air. Along the path of 20 to 30 meters, more than 10 bats were instantly blown apart by a destructive force. They were completely crushed into a rain of blood. Qin Wushuang was so shocked that he could not close his mouth. Looking at the distance, it should be 20 meters away. Although this casual stab of his finger contained the middle rush sword intent of the coagulated sword, it should not be this exaggerated, right? Before discovering this cave dwelling, Qin Wushuang had practiced the coagulated sword and started with the six-stage void sword. Although he could still attack from the air, he could not use it. Although he could fly in the air, the piercing distance would not exceed 5 meters. Moreover, the strength would not be this exaggerated. It was even more impossible to bring out a physical red light. It had a physical form. This sword intent with a faint red light was clearly the fifth stage of the coagulated sword. Physical sword. How could he suddenly practice the physical sword? Qin Wushuang still remembered that this coagulated sword was a peerless technique. In his previous life, none of the ancient martial arts masters had practiced it to the fifth stage, physical sword. It was said that only by breaking through the limit of the postliminary stage and entering the innate stage could one have the hope of practicing the fifth stage of the physical sword. Could it be? Qin Wushuang's eyes revealed a look of ecstasy. Thinking back to the miraculous encounters of these days, although he did not dare to be overly optimistic, subconsciously he already had a vague direction. Unknowingly, he seemed to have really broken through to the innate stage. If he was not an innate stage, how could his entire temperament suddenly change so much? If he was not an innate stage, how could he feel a kind of rebirth in his body? If he was not an innate stage, how could he practice the coagulated sword to the physical sword? If he was not an innate stage, how could he attack a target 20 meters away from him without any decrease in the lethality? He still remembered the innate stage technique that the martial saint had displayed at the Martial Saint Mountain. 10 meters away, a casual attack destroyed a stone bench, and his attack just now was obviously different from the martial saints. Innate stage? Qin Wushuang carefully pondered over these two words, and the concept of innate stage suddenly became clear. A kind of epiphany, as if it was supposed to be like this, suddenly appeared clearly in his mind. Innate stage, he was indeed an innate stage. All kinds of signs were proving this point, and the so-called breakthrough, he indeed had not experienced it. But Qin Wushuang knew that he could not be confused by the process of breaking through. Earlier, his train of thought had always been wrong, and he thought that it was impossible to enter the innate stage without breaking through. Obviously, all of this should be related to the miraculous encounter he had on the first day at the entrance of the cave. That five-colored light had never appeared again. But Qin Wushuang could almost be sure that the miraculous baptism he had experienced, like a dream, should be the booster that helped him enter the innate stage. Whoosh! Qin Wushuang slowly stood up, his eyes brimming with joy. Innate stage. This was the stage that he had always wanted to enter. But he did not expect that, unknowingly, he had broken through. What was even more hilarious was that after entering the Xiantian realm, he still felt like he was in a dream. Only now did he truly realize this point. Of course, he also knew that this was not because he was not sensitive, nor was it because he was negligent. The miraculous experience on the first day was probably just a baptism. The signs of an innate stage were not obvious. After so many days of settling and consolidating, the Xiantian opportunity in his body had finally taken shape, reaching a state of maturity. Innate. When Qin Wushuang thought of this, his heart was filled with pride. Once one entered the Xiantian realm, it would be like a flood dragon entering the sea or a ferocious tiger entering the mountains. From then on, one would be able to leap freely in the vast sea and fly freely in the vast sky. From now on, his world would be broadened. Wherever he looked, everything would be even more exciting. P.S. The innate that everyone has been waiting for has finally arrived. Hee, but there are very few monthly tickets in the afternoon. For the sake of becoming an innate, I'll hand over all the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Haha. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 129. Qin Wushuang planned to keep the secret of entering the upper sky realm a secret. If he wanted to announce it, he would have to wait until his sister's wedding. He wanted to observe what kind of attitude the entire heavenly royal territory had towards the royal Qin family. If the secret of entering the upper sky realm was exposed, then the meaning of probing would be greatly reduced. Anyone with a normal brain would know how to choose in front of an upper sky realm. That kind of loyalty that came from fear was impossible to change at any time. In the 3 days before Qin Xiu's wedding, Qin Wushuang practiced the coagulated sword every day, especially the little Shang sword on his left thumb and the middle rushing sword on his right middle finger. The sword intent of these two sword intents were very similar. They were different paths leading to the same goal. They belonged to the type of sword intents that were bold and powerful. Along the way, he could use both hands without any hindrance. If the sword intents of the two hands were different, naturally he would not be able to use them as smoothly as he wanted. When facing an enemy, he would lack a sense of calmness. When he had just entered the upper sky realm, a stable upper sky battle technique was very necessary. This would determine whether or not he would be able to fight against an upper sky realm, or even whether or not he would be able to win. At least, Qin Wushuang was lucky. In his previous world, this mysterious martial technique was at least level 6. Only the level 6 Void Sword belonged to the pre-sky realm. As expected, the higher realms were all upper sky battle techniques, especially the level 5 True Sword. The more Qin Wushuang practiced it, the more he could feel its mysterious power. Using the fingers as a technique, it was much more flexible and light than fists, legs, and palms. And the sword intent of the little Shang sword and the middle rushing sword was never lacking in majesty. Combining flexibility and lightness, plus the majesty of the sword intent itself, this coagulated sword was truly a skill bestowed by the heavens. Qin Wushuang rejoiced that when he first came to this world, he did not give up on comprehending the coagulated sword. Now it seemed that his initial choice was very far-sighted. If he had not been immersed in comprehending the sword intent of the coagulated sword, it would have been impossible for him to have such a level of comprehension. This was a process of dripping water penetrating a stone. Only when the water reached a certain point could the channel be formed. The coagulated sword is a combat skill. In the Khanate realm, one needs to continuously absorb the natural energy of heaven and earth to temper the body and transform it into one's own strength. This process was the same as when he first cultivated his inner strength, but now he was cultivating his spiritual power. To absorb spiritual energy, you need a cultivation method. Qin Wushuang's thoughts kept spinning as he began to think of a long-term cultivation plan. Furthermore, if you only have a Xiantian realm battle skill without a corresponding movement technique to complement it, I'm afraid that it would be a fly in the ointment. In the cultivation of martial arts, balance was important at every stage. One foot can't walk fast, and one fist can't hurt. Everything must be done in a two-pronged approach and flying with both wings. Qin Wushuang had considered many problems. However, it seemed that there were still two important aspects. The first was the cultivation method for cultivating spiritual power, and the second was the footwork for fighting. A good set of footwork could sometimes surpass many powerful battle techniques. Thinking of this, Qin Wushuang's mind suddenly flashed with a magical footwork manual. This manual, in terms of magical aspects, was incomparable to all the martial arts manuals in his previous life. The reason why Qin Wushuang had never considered cultivating it was because it was completely different from his Hodian martial arts path. It was a set of footwork that was gentle and ethereal, like an immortal. It was a footwork passed down from the Taoist sect in his previous life. Its name was Immortal Ascending Cloud Steps. Now, his cultivation had entered the Khanate realm. This was a realm completely different from the Hodian realm. In the Hodian realm, one focused on one path, either masculine, feminine, elegant, or domineering, not sticking to one pattern. But the Khanate realm was completely different. The Khanate realm was a realm where one's strength and the natural energy of heaven and earth merged. Since it involved the natural energy of heaven and earth, it was necessary to understand its mysteries. The natural energy of heaven and earth is all-encompassing. No matter if you're a blazing sun or a drizzle, it is the natural energy of heaven and earth. If one focuses on one path, whether it is the masculine path or the feminine path, it is obvious that one has not completely obtained the essence of the connate realm. The essence of the connate realm is to contain all the natural energy of heaven and earth. The more it can contain, the higher the cultivation level. Qin Wushuang had no idea about these principles before. But suddenly, after breaking through to the connate realm, these principles that had been sleeping in his mind suddenly opened the key and were clearly displayed in his sea of consciousness. This was the mystery of the connate realm. Understanding one path, understanding all paths. After entering the connate realm, his path of cultivation was destined to be broadened. He could no longer stick to the masculine path of the past. Immortal Ascending Cloud Steps was a footwork of the Xiaoyao sect in his previous life. Some people said that it was passed down by immortals. Some said that it was a footwork created by a connate Dan master. Qin Wushuang decided to start cultivating this footwork. This footwork was called Immortal Ascending Steps. Naturally, it had its mysteries. Walking according to Fushi's 64 hexagrams was very profound. If he wanted to learn this footwork well, he must first master the 64 hexagrams. Then, there was the problem of practicing the footwork. If he couldn't even master the hexagrams, practicing this footwork would be like trying to get a fish out of a tree. There would be no results. Fortunately, although Qin Wushuang didn't practice this footwork in his previous life, he had studied a lot of Taoist martial arts. He was also quite familiar with the 64 hexagrams. Practicing this footwork saved him a lot of trouble. The biggest trick to practicing this footwork was to have no distractions. Other than myself, there was nothing else. I am the only one in this universe. If I walked this footwork according to my original intention, no matter if the flowers bloomed or withered or the clouds moved, I would ignore them all. As soon as Qin Wushuang said he would practice it, he started to practice this body movement technique in the wide area of the Great Song Mountains. This footwork had a 16-word chant: impermanence, as if in danger, as if in safety; difficult to advance, and stop, as if in the past, as if in the past. It explained the profoundness of this footwork. Its movements were fleeting, unfathomable, like the wind, like smoke, without a trace. Qin Wushuang walked a few steps. At first, it was a little sluggish. He slowly walked a circle and practiced the footwork separately. Step by step, he became more and more familiar with it. This set of footwork, when practiced separately, looked very ordinary. It was like a drunkard walking unsteadily, or like a dancer dancing gracefully. There was no pattern to it at all, but after walking a circle and then a second circle, he was able to understand it. When connected, this footwork was like moving clouds and flowing water. It flowed smoothly without any sluggishness. Whoosh! After Qin Wushuang walked 3 circles, he slowly stopped. After finishing this set of footwork, his whole body was immediately energized. It was as if his Xiantian level had increased. For 3 consecutive days, Qin Wushuang was engrossed in practicing coagulated sword and immortal Lingyun steps. In the blink of an eye, it was the night before Qin Xiu's wedding. After Qin Wushuang had finished a day of training, the whole family gathered together to discuss tomorrow's wedding. Currently, the venerable De Shi family and the Eastwood Qin family had become very close. Wushuang, do you think I've been too busy recently? For the past few days, I've been feeling uneasy and restless in my heart. It's as if something big is about to happen, but I can't figure out what it is exactly. Qin Lianshan had been troubled by this question. Now that the whole family was together, he did not avoid it. Although he had said that this game would dampen his mood before the wedding, sometimes he had to pay attention to his warrior's instinct. As soon as he spoke, De Shiming was also secretly surprised. So father-in-law also has this feeling? Son-in-law, you also have this feeling? Qin Lianshan was slightly surprised. Currently, Qin Lianshan had already seen De Ming as his son-in-law. De Ming nodded and said with a serious expression, "I've had this feeling for a long time. At first, I thought it was because I was too busy and had too many things on my mind. But after hearing father-in-law's words, could it be? In the past few days, Qin Wushuang had been leaving early in the morning and returning late at night to train. He did not feel restless at all. However, in the past few days, he could feel his own upper sky, qi, fluctuating restlessly. It seemed to be some kind of resonance. He had always thought that it was the martial saint releasing his upper sky qi from the faraway martial saint mountain. Hearing his father and De Ming's words, Qin Wushuang thought about it carefully. Immediately, he smacked his lips and realized something different. Could it be that their restless feeling came from this upper sky qi fluctuation? Normally, pre-sky realm warriors like them would not be able to sense this upper sky qi. However, once the upper sky qi was not concealed, it could still display a strong offensive power and make these pre-sky realm warriors tremble. It was just like how Li Wuji had used his upper sky qi to provoke the martial saint. Each of the disciples of the martial saint mountain felt a wave of pressure and unspeakable discomfort. On the other hand, Qin Wushuang was calm. Now, he was already an upper sky realm warrior. If someone dared to cause trouble at his sister's wedding, then they must be tired of living. Father, big brother to Shi, at the wedding tomorrow, the Flying Feather, Xiong Pai, and Falcon Guards will enter in alert state. Those newly recruited elite guards will be in charge of the outer security. With 2 layers of defense, they can deal with most situations. Plus, with the purple-robed great honored warrior presiding over the wedding, unless they are tired of living, they would not choose to cause trouble tomorrow. I promise that sister and big brother to Shi's wedding will go smoothly. No one will be able to interfere. If anyone dares to cause trouble, they will pay an unbearable price." Qin Wushuang was not speaking nonsense, but his true thoughts. In his entire life, he only had one sister who loved him the most, cared for him, and protected him in all aspects. Now that she was getting married, Qin Wushuang would not allow any accidents to happen. Whoever caused trouble would receive Qin Wushuang's most severe revenge. Qin Xiu giggled, "Father, big brother to Shi, don't worry. With Wushuang here, I feel reassured. Think about it. Even the Redwood King and Patriarch Shi Min had to compromise with Wushuang. Within the Bayou country, unless the martial saint wants to make things difficult for us, what else should we be afraid of?" Qin Lianshan and De Ming thought about it and felt her words made sense. The martial saint appreciated Wushuang. Of course, he would not stop this wedding. Or else, he would not have sent the purple-robed, great honored warrior to preside over the wedding. The 4th time will most likely be around 9 o'clock. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.qitian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 130. The Qin mansion was decorated with lanterns and color banners. Everywhere, the atmosphere was filled with a joyous atmosphere. Guests from all directions arrived in an endless stream. The father and son of the Qin family were busy serving the guests. Fortunately, these guests had come not long ago and were familiar with each other. Thus, they did not need to be overly courteous. When all the guests had arrived, the auspicious time had arrived. Before the Qin mansion, the firecrackers were fired. The sound of the firecrackers shook the sky. Everywhere, the guests stood up to congratulate the guests. The purple-robed, honored warrior who was hosting the wedding also had a face full of smiles. He shouted, "Please welcome the newlyweds." As soon as he finished speaking, a pair of newlyweds walked in leisurely with the sound of a string instrument. The man was handsome, and the woman was like a celestial being. It was as if they were a couple that had walked down from the heavens. They were a match made in heaven and made people click their tongues in wonder and envy. De Ming was wearing a bright red robe and appeared to be a bridegroom. He cupped his hands and thanked the guests from all directions. On the other hand, Qin Xiu was wearing a phoenix coronet and a red brocade robe. The two of them walked into the main hall leisurely. The guests from both factions clapped thunderously and cheered one after another. The purple-robed honored warrior laughed. First, bow to heaven and earth. The newlyweds kneeled down and bowed to heaven and earth. Second, bow to your parents. On the Qin side, only Qin Lianshan was here, and on the Dashi family, only their parents were here. They all had a face full of smiles as they accepted the newlyweds' kowtow. Husband and wife, bow to each other. The purple-robed honored warrior announced again. All the guests from all directions wore a joyful expression. The Redwood King was also among them. Although he also had a smile on his face, if one observed carefully, one could see that his eyes were flickering as he kept looking outside the door. Qin Wushuang had been paying attention to the Redwood King. He frowned slightly. Just when he was about to move, suddenly, his ears twitched and he felt a sense of danger. Someone was invading. In the next moment, Qin Wushuang had such a thought. Sure enough, a sinister sneer came from outside like a gust of chilly wind from the depths of hell, shooting in like an arrow. Initially, the main hall was bustling with noise and excitement. However, this voice was extremely penetrating. It was clearly not very sharp, but it completely penetrated through the liveliness of the hall and directly penetrated everyone's eardrums, causing their hearts to tremble and goosebumps to appear all over their bodies. The purple-robed Grand Sovereign was the second to react. He raised his eyebrows, and a cold light shot out of his eyes toward the door. Clearly, he also felt a strong sense of crisis. Then, everyone felt that something was wrong and turned their heads to look outside the door. Only the Redwood King's heart returned to its original position. The corners of his mouth curled up into an imperceptible smile. He knew that with Li Wuji's arrival, the Qin clan's bloody calamity had also arrived. Qin Lianshan's expression changed. Shi Ming stood in front of Qin Xiu unconsciously and shielded his newlywed wife behind him. He glared at the door angrily. Being today's main character, the Shi Ming was clearly furious at this uninvited guest. Qin Wushuang stomped his feet and dashed toward the door. "Who are you?" he shouted. "How dare you come to my mansion and make trouble?" The yard outside the main hall was empty, and there was not a single person in sight. Just when everyone was feeling suspicious, Qin Wushuang's eyes had already stopped at the little pond in the yard. Next to the little pond, there were two giant jujube trees. Qin Wushuang stared at the jujube trees. "Scoundrel, since you are here, don't hide." Initially, Li Wuji had wanted to use his upper sky skills to show off. However, he did not expect that Qin Wushuang would see through his whereabouts. He could not help but feel disappointed and even more furious. Initially, he wanted to make fun of the Qin family and kill them one by one to satisfy his desire to torture people. Unexpectedly, before he had even started to make fun of them, someone had already exposed his whereabouts. In a flash, a figure floated to the door. His gaze stopped onto Shi Ming and Qin Xiu's body without any restraint. He clicked his tongue and said, "Bride, take off your red headscarf and let me see if you are handsome." This tone was full of ridicule. Apparently, it was extremely rude. All the guests looked at each other in dismay. They did not know where this young man had come from and how he had the guts to cause trouble at the royal mansion. However, each of those stage 9 warriors of a genuine force had a layer of doubt in their hearts. Especially the purple-robed, great honored warrior. He was even more shocked. He realized that he could not see through this young man's movements. He could not even detect his exact strength. At first glance, this young man was like a deep pond that he could not see the bottom of. The intuition of a powerful warrior made his hair stand on end. An inexplicable sense of fear emerged in his heart. Upper sky. The purple-robed, great honored warrior shockingly discovered that this young man was an upper sky. He did not know where this upper sky had come from. Without any warning, this upper sky had come, and it seemed that he had come to cause trouble. When an upper sky warrior came to cause trouble, it would not be as simple as flirting with a bride. Although the purple-robed, great honored warrior could not determine the exact intentions of the other party, he could vaguely feel a wave of rich, murderous intent. Most likely, behind this young man, there were countless murderous experiences. With an expressionless face, Qin Wushuang took a step forward and gave a cold sneer. A straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. Where are you from? Who sent you to cause trouble at the royal Qin family? Li Wuji sized Qin Wushuang up with a pair of cold eyes and asked lightly, You are Qin Wushuang? Li Wuji did not conceal his upper sky presence at all as he urged it without restraint. He kept pressuring Qin Wushuang with his upper sky presence. On the other hand, Qin Wushuang remained calm and collected. Secretly, he neutralized Li Wuji's pressure. Unlike Li Wuji, he had completely suppressed his upper sky presence to prevent Li Wuji from discovering the secret of him entering the upper sky realm. He knew that for today's matter, there would be a battle. Perhaps this battle would be his first upper sky battle since he had arrived in this world. He would not have any experience or luck. He only had one trump card that he must hide well. Only by letting Li Wuji underestimate him would he have a greater chance of winning. That's me. You came here to cause trouble. Could it be you do not even dare to announce your name? Li Wuji sneered. You are not qualified to ask for my name. With a sharp gaze, he glanced around and shouted, Today, I will only kill people of the Qin family. For the other guests, if you don't want to die, get out of here in 10 seconds. If you are late, you will be buried with the people of the Qin family. That purple-robed old man, come here. This last shout was directed at the purple-robed, great honored warrior. Although the purple-robed, great honored warrior was fearful of the other party being an upper sky warrior, he was not afraid when he was called out. He walked out and shouted, Young man, this is the mansion of the royal family of the Bayou. If you want to cause trouble, you must know where you are. Li Wuji laughed. I only came here to cause trouble because I saw it clearly. If I did not see it clearly, ordinary people would not be qualified for me to cause trouble. Old man, if you want to live, crawl under my crotch and you can get out of here. Or else, you will be the first to be buried with me. Li Wuji glanced across the entire scene and saw the superior position of the purple-robed, great honored warrior. Thus, he decided to make an example out of the purple-robed, great honored warrior. If he took care of this purple-robed, great honored warrior, the other people would lose their fighting spirit. The purple-robed, great honored warrior sneered. Such arrogant tone. I know you're an upper sky warrior. However, in the Bayou country, it's possible that no one could stop you. As soon as he said these words, all the guests were in an uproar. Upper sky warrior? Inwardly, those stage 9 genuine force elite warriors, such as Shiminyu, felt apprehensive. Initially, they felt somewhat depressed as they felt that this young man was not simple. Inwardly, they also had some doubts. However, they could not confirm it. However, with the reminder from the purple-robed, great honored warrior, it had been confirmed. Upper sky warrior? Causing trouble at the royal Qin mansion? This way, wouldn't the Qin family be in big trouble? Hearing the words of upper sky warrior, the mood of all the guests at the scene changed. Earlier, they only held the attitude of watching the show and did not have any personal plans. However, the other party was an upper sky warrior and had clearly said that if they did not leave, they would die. What should they do? Was integrity more important or reputation more important? While everyone was watching, inwardly, they were extremely hesitant. They only hoped that someone would be the first to step out and leave. Then, everyone else would have a right to run away. Before an upper sky warrior, there was no need to talk about face. Li Wuji smiled eerily and revealed a mouth of white teeth. He laughed eerily. Old man, since you know I am an upper sky, you still dare to be so tough. I am somewhat impressed. However, I've always been unmoved by force or persuasion. Since you have a tough bone, then I will start with you. After he had finished speaking, his face turned cold and he moved his shoulder to attack. In the blink of an eye, an explosive shout came from afar. Hold on. This hold on sounded as if it came from hundreds of miles away. However, it also seemed to be floating right next to the ear. Sometimes far, sometimes close, it was unpredictable. As soon as the purple-robed, great honored warrior heard this voice, he was overjoyed and blurted out, Martial Saint. Li Wuji frowned and looked outside with rapt attention. Of course, he could feel this voice, this aura. Clearly, it was from an upper sky warrior. Could it be that person from the Martial Saint Mountain had finally arrived? A trace of a strange smile appeared on the corner of Li Wuji's mouth. Even if that person from the Martial Saint Mountain had come, it would only make this drama more funny. So what if it was that person from the Martial Saint Mountain? With the Ji'in command plate in hand, if he dared to step out when his teacher came, he would take 10 heads for him. Suddenly, a wave of dazzling lights appeared in the sky. Next, waves of auspicious lights shot out. Like lightning and wind, the Martial Saint's figure appeared inside the yard as if he had teleported. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. Dressed in a green robe, he still wore the same outfit as when he was at the Martial Saint Mountain. Qin Wushuang was overjoyed. "Martial Saint, Qin Wushuang is here to meet you." Li Wuji laughed and sized him up with a cold gaze. "You are the master of the Martial Saint Mountain in Bayou Country, right?" The Martial Saint said lightly, "That is me." "Young man, where are you from?" Li Wuji snorted lightly and said with a somewhat mocking tone, "I am from the great Luo Empire. So you are a guest from the mother country. I wonder, what relationship does a little royal family have with an upper sky warrior from the mother country? It has startled an upper sky warrior like you to come? Ha, do I need a reason? Martial Saint, you have come all the way here to protect this kid, right?" Li Wuji pointed at Qin Wushuang. "This kid is the rare genius of the Bayou country. I have the intention of loving him. I hope you can give me a way out. For this favor, I will repay it in the future." Li Wuji laughed. "Favor? Your Excellency Martial Saint, you think too highly of yourself. When it comes to favors, even you are worthless in my eyes. Why don't you just say it? For today's business, why don't you get involved?" The Martial Saint was afraid of his identity as a guest from the mother country. Thus, he had left some leeway when he spoke. When he saw this kid acting so arrogantly and not giving him any face, of course he was furious. "This is not business. I must get involved." Li Wuji nodded viciously. He flicked his sleeve, and an object appeared in his palm. "My teacher expected that you would get involved. Before we left, he reminded me, if you want to get involved, I will show you this Ji'in command plate. If you insist on meddling in other people's business, my master will personally come to take your head in a few days." Ji'in command plate? Ji'in sect? Inwardly, the Martial Saint was shocked. Immediately, an image of a terrifying sect and a terrifying elite warrior emerged in his mind. "Haha, I still can't write today. Since I could not fulfill my wish, everyone will despise Li Tian. I will rest my energy and come back tomorrow with all my strength. I will write 5 chapters to repay everyone. The upper sky battle is about to start. Tomorrow's plot will be exciting. Brothers, tomorrow, Li Tian will write the rest of the plot in one go and let everyone have a good time. I believe that everyone is also looking forward to this upper sky battle. To win the first battle, take your monthly votes and cheer for Wushuang. Haha. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 131. Besides the Martial Saint, no one else at the scene knew about the Ji'in command plate. Of course, the Redwood King was an exception. When these secular martial artists saw the Martial Saint and the legendary totem figure of the Bayou country, all of them were shocked and surprised. However, as they listened, the atmosphere seemed to have changed. From the tone of the Martial Saint, he had been very polite. It seemed that he was also afraid of this young man. However, this young man had spoken with an extremely arrogant tone, as if he did not even put the Martial Saint in his eyes. In the end, he had even threatened him. With the Ji'in command plate in his hand, the Martial Saint knew that this command plate was not fake after a glance. As an upper sky realm warrior, the Martial Saint had also participated in many pageants in the mother country. Although he did not hold high position, he had heard a lot of news about the elite warriors of the mother country. For example, the owner of this Ji'in command plate, Old Man Ji'in, had established the Ji'in sect. Although it was not one of the top powerhouses in the Great Luo Empire, it was still a powerhouse that could not be underestimated, especially since Old Man Ji-in had a surly personality and would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. If one had truly offended him, most likely, he would have kept his words. The martial saint also knew that the disciple sent out by Old Man Ji-in was no less powerful than him. And for sure, Old Man Ji-in's strength was far above his. Most likely, Old Man Ji-in was not lying when he said he would take his head. However, how could a martial saint easily give up his position because of a few threatening words? Not to mention, he had done it before all these secular martial artists. And these martial artists had always viewed him as a totem figure. If he chose to give in under everyone's eyes, then the martial spirit of the Bayou country, which had built a country with martial arts, would be destroyed and their spiritual backbone would be broken. Most importantly, he would not allow anything to happen to Qin Wushuang, this exceptional young man. He could not imagine what would happen to the Bayou country if he could not hand over the person when the mother country wanted to see Qin Wushuang. When he thought here, the martial saint had made up his mind. Although he had kept a low profile, it did not mean that he did not have a lofty side. Although he was polite, it did not mean that he was afraid of the young Li Wuji. Once his thoughts were clear, his domineering aura naturally appeared. He sneered and sized Li Wuji from head to toe. Then he said with a cold tone, "Young man, if you think you can do whatever you want in the Bayou country with just one Jiyin commanding plate, then you are overestimating the influence of your sect. In the Great Luo Empire, is not your Jiyin sect's turn to decide life and death." The martial saint slowly put on a pair of gloves. The exterior of the glove was wrapped in golden threads. The design was gorgeous, and one could tell at a glance that it was not an ordinary item. Li Wuji stared warily at the martial saint. "Old man, it seems like you're determined to get involved in this mess." The martial saint activated his innate aura and said coldly, "I don't care who your master is. Based on what you've said today, this battle is unavoidable." Li Wuji's eyes spun rapidly as many thoughts flashed through his mind. He came here to kill, not to fight with an innate. In today's situation, since this innate expert was prepared to make a move, the situation would not be favorable for Li Wuji. After all, at most, he could fight to a draw with the martial saint. If both sides fought with all their strength, in the end, it would be a situation where both sides would suffer. Once both sides suffered, his life would not be safe in the other party's territory. Li Wuji was never a person that would suffer a loss when the odds were against him. He knew how to calculate. He smiled evilly and revealed a mouthful of white teeth. "Old man, since you want to fight with me, I will not let you have your way. Let's just waste time like this. Let's see who can outlast the other. Since the Gene commanding plate could not summon you, I can only send a letter to my teacher. I believe that in less than half a month, he will come to greet you personally. By that time, let's see what you will use to protect the Qin." After he had finished speaking, he let out a long laugh to the sky. Then, he flapped his long sleeves and was about to leave. Suddenly, he remembered something and turned around with extreme malice. "Old man, you better guard here 24 hours a day, or else I might come to kill you at any time. I promise I will not show mercy when killing people. For those related to the Qin, regardless of human or animal, I will not leave a single one alive." The martial saint frowned slightly. Since this Li Wuji was so cunning, for sure, he would do what he said. Could it be that he was going to waste his time here? It would be all right if it was useful to waste his time. However, if he waited until Old Man Jean arrived, everything would become troublesome. Unless he also asked for help from the mother country. However, would the royal family of the mother country be willing to offend the Jiyin sect for an exam champion from a subordinate country? Inwardly, the martial saint was also anxious and uncertain. Of course, he also did not know that the source of this exam came from the Stargaze Palace. Qin Wushuang had been observing with cold eyes. He was observing two people. One was Li Wuji, and the other was the Redwood King. Especially the Redwood King. Although he had maintained a calm expression after Qin Wushuang had appeared, The instantaneous change in his eyes could not be hidden from Qin Wushuang, the observant person. When Li Wuji had appeared, there was a trace of expected and expectant joy in his eyes. And when Li Wuji had said that he was going to kill someone, his eyes were full of schadenfreude. Until the martial saint had appeared, the Redwood King's expression showed some surprise. Until a moment ago, when Li Wuji had said that he was going to leave, the Redwood King had become somewhat disappointed. All of these changes were within Qin Wushuang's control. When he saw that Li Wuji was about to leave, suddenly, Qin Wushuang sneered and said lightly, "Jin command plate, what kind of bullshit is that? Since it's so useful, why did you come here with such a high profile and leave with your tail between your legs? Could it be that the Jin sect is so useless?" Li Wuji had always placed all his attention on the martial saint. However, he did not guard against the Qin people, who were already a bunch of walking corpses in his eyes, daring to provoke him. With a cold expression, he laughed evilly and stared at Qin Wushuang with an unfriendly expression. The martial saint jumped and stood between the two of them. Apparently, he also knew that no pre-sky realm warrior could defend against the attack power of an upper sky realm warrior. He could decide a person's life and death with just a wave of his hand. Although the martial saint's jump appeared natural, everyone could see that he was protecting Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and looked at the martial saint with gratitude. However, he did not speak. Instead, he glanced around with a pair of knife-like eyes. With a trace of a strange smile on the corner of his mouth, he stopped at the Redwood King. "Redwood King, your plan of killing 2 birds with 1 stone is nice." The Redwood King was stunned and pretended to be stupid. "Marquis Wushuang, what did you say?" A straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. Whether these disciples of the Jin sect are related to you, you know better than me. Initially, when you had captured so many young girls, I had suspected that you were up to something. Now, it seems that you had captured so many young girls to supply them to the Jin sect. Both parties had a shady deal. You had borrowed the knife of the Jin sect to kill my people. This is a good wishful thinking. Qin Wushuang spoke slowly with an unfriendly tone. Like a hawk, he stared at the Redwood King. The Redwood King became furious and denied. "Indeed, it's a bunch of nonsense." Qin Wushuang smiled coldly and turned around to look at Li Wuji. "Mister, the Redwood King had the guts to do it, but he did not have the guts to admit it. Could it be that your Jin sect is also a cowardly person who does not dare to admit it?" Li Wuji laughed. "Kid, you know how to use provocation." The martial saint's expression also became serious. He looked at the Redwood King coldly and shouted, "Redwood King, this way, you have led the wolf into the house, right?" Suppressed by the martial saint's upper sky chi, the Redwood King was shocked inwardly. He opened his mouth and wanted to deny it, but he could not say a word. The martial saint nodded. "Good. As the king of a territory in the Bayou country, you have betrayed us. It seems that you are tired of living." With a flushed face, the Redwood King argued, "Martial Saint, how can you believe that kid's one-sided words? If I did it, why would I be here today? I thought you would admit it. Unexpectedly, I overestimated you." The martial saint sighed and said with a stern tone, "Don't you know that an upper sky warrior can tell if you are lying from your eyes? Even if you're a formidable king, before an upper sky warrior, you are only a child who has just learned how to walk." The expression on the Redwood King's face changed drastically. He looked at Li Wuji with a questioning look. Apparently, he was skeptical about the martial saint's words. Li Wuji shook his head with a bitter smile. Although this Redwood King was cunning, he was not as cunning as that martial saint. The martial saint's words were clearly a test. If the Redwood King had nothing to do with Li Wuji, he would not have reacted this way. And when he looked at Li Wuji, it proved that he was guilty. Indeed, it was related to Li Wuji. When the Redwood King saw Li Wuji's bitter smile, he knew that he had been tricked. He shouted, "Even if I did it, so what? The Qin family is only a nouveau riche. What right do they have to steal my son's limelight? What right do they have to divide my territory?" Qin Wushuang said coldly, "Stealing your son's limelight, stealing your territory, and ruining your relationship with the Jin sect. These are all things in the past. Today, I still have one more thing to do. What do you want? The Redwood King said proudly. Nothing. I want to exterminate your entire family. Qin Wushuang's tone flashed with a strong, murderous intent. With a trace of mockery in his eyes, he stopped at He Yufei, who was standing next to the Redwood King. The extermination of the Redwood Mansion will start with you, the second son of the Redwood King. He Yufei's pale face was shocked, and he took a step back subconsciously. Qin Wushuang sneered. You don't need to hide. Even if you stand still, I will not touch even one of your fingers, because you are already a person who is about to die. These days, He Yufei had a bad premonition. When he heard Qin Wushuang's words, it was as if his throat was being squeezed. He asked stutteringly, What did you do to me? Nothing much. I only used some poisonous medicine on your body. Qin Wushuang's tone did not have a trace of humanity. I once swore that whoever dares to harm my family, I will make him regret it for the rest of his life. Now you, the Redwood King, want to exterminate the Qin family. According to the teachings of our ancestors, those who want to exterminate the Qin family, I will use all my strength to fight back. I will not hesitate to destroy both jade and common stone. The expression on the Redwood King's face changed. He made a hand gesture, and those stage 9 and 8 elite warriors from his family immediately stood on both sides. Both sides were ready to fight. A battle was about to break out. P.S. I had something to do this morning, so the first update is only now. I will not be busy in the afternoon. I will focus on writing. Today, 5 updates. There will be at least one more update in the afternoon. From this morning until now, I did not have a single ticket. Brothers, please give me 2 chapters to refresh myself. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 132. Li Wuji saw that beside the Redwood King, there were elite warriors at Stage 9 of the Genuine Force, and a few Stage 8 warriors. And on the Qin family side, there were 3 or 4 Stage 9 warriors among the guests. However, apparently, they had not joined the Qin family. He might have a chance in this battle. As long as the Redwood King's power could restrain these people from the royal Qin mansion, it would not be a problem for Li Wuji to deal with a martial saint. Perhaps it would be difficult for him to win against the martial saint. However, it would not be a problem to restrain him or even kill a few people at the same time. When he thought here, he sneered and took a few steps closer. Mr. Martial Saint, this place is still too narrow for a battle between upper sky warriors. Why don't we go outside and learn from each other? The Martial Saint glanced at the scene and understood the situation clearly. For the Qin family, the purple-robed, great honored warrior, Qin Wushuang, was a Stage 9 elite warrior. Among the guests, the Shimin feudal lords and the Nangong feudal lords were both patriarchs of the heavenly royal territory and were also Stage 9. And on the Redwood King's side, there were 5 Stage 9 warriors and 6 Stage 8 warriors. They had a great advantage in terms of absolute warriors. If he was lured away by Li Wuji, most likely, the Redwood King would take control of the situation. Just when he was hesitating, Qin Wushuang suddenly sneered. He used the immortal virtuous cloud steps and dashed out like a ghost. He raised both of his sleeves and pounced forward. When the Stage 9 warriors beside the Redwood King saw Qin Wushuang approaching, 2 of them immediately dashed out. One on the left and one on the right. They sent out 2 palms towards Qin Wushuang. The immortal virtuous cloud steps was extremely strange. Although he had arrived before the Redwood King, he suddenly twisted his body and slipped to the back like a slippery fish. He pushed out both of his palms, one on each side. He attacked from both sides towards the 2 Stage 9 warriors beside the Redwood King. For these 2 palms, Qin Wushuang did not use any of his upper sky power. He only used his internal strength to attack. However, with the help of the immortal virtuous cloud steps, his movements were beyond the comprehension of pre-sky realm warriors. Although he had arrived at the front, he suddenly moved to the back. This battle between two Hoteon masters could be said to be a life and death situation. Sure enough, when the two ninth phase elders reacted and hastily pulled back their palms to block, they had already been struck in the back by Qin Wushuang. With a push of his palm, it was like a collapsing dam. All the internal energy poured out onto the bodies of the two. The power of this strike was not to be underestimated. Only the crisp sound of bones cracking could be heard. Their backs seemed to have caved in all of a sudden, and all the organs in their bodies were squeezed out towards their chests. Puff! Blood violently spurted out. Two ninth-level genuine martial realm martial artists had actually been killed by a young man in the blink of an eye. An unbelievable scene unfolded before everyone's eyes. Before the Redwood King could react, his brocade robe was covered in blood. The bodies of the two ninth-level true martial realm elders were completely deformed. They fell to the ground in a tragic manner. The Redwood King gasped as he stared at Qin Wushuang in shock. For your information, these two Stage 9 elders had followed him for many years. He clearly knew the strength they possessed. Even if they could not be compared to the four great honored warriors of the Zhenwu holy place, they could at least fight against the purple-robed great honored warrior. However, these two elite warriors had been instantly killed by Qin Wushuang, not to mention the Redwood King. Even that Li Wuji was somewhat surprised. How could he not see that they were two Stage 9 genuine martial realm warriors? It was not impossible for him to kill those two instantly. However, when it happened to a pre-sky realm warrior, it made him feel somewhat strange. The martial saint laughed. People of the Ji-In Gate, didn't you want to fight? With an expressionless face, Li Wuji kept mumbling and cursing. Trash. All of you are trash. Suddenly, his face turned cold as he shouted, Let's fight. Mr. Martial Saint, I will let you know what a joke you, the Martial Saint of the Bayou country, is. Before the Martial Saint could speak, Qin Wushuang suddenly waved his hand and shouted, Hold on. Both Li Wuji and the Martial Saint looked at him with surprise. Qin Wushuang nodded and took a deep breath. Then, he said slowly, Mr. Martial Saint, I am deeply grateful for your protection of the Qin family. However, since this Ji-In Gate claimed to be from a major sect in a mother country, I am not willing to involve you in my personal matters. When he said here, Qin Wushuang glared at Li Wuji and shouted, Ji-In Gate, state your name. I, Qin Wushuang, do not kill nameless scoundrels. Indeed, Li Wuji was stunned. For a moment, he could not wrap his head around it. Was this kid challenging him? With a stern expression, Qin Wushuang stared at him coldly without moving his gaze. Apparently, he was challenging him. Not to mention Li Wuji, even the martial saint was slightly surprised. Qin Lianshan and Shi Ming even cried out, Wushuang. Qin Wushuang waved his hand and motioned for everyone to calm down. He stepped forward and fixed his gaze on Li Wuji. Now, let everyone see who is the real joke. Instead of getting angry, Li Wuji laughed. He licked his lips and kept nodding. Good, good, good. Kid, you have guts. Listen well. My name is Li Wuji. I am the head disciple of Old Man Ji-In. Qin Wushuang also nodded and said to the martial saint, Mr. Martial Saint, I have another request. Go ahead. Vividly, the martial saint also had a strange feeling. He felt that since Qin Wushuang was so confident, he must have some trump cards. Okay, this battle is the continuation of the grudge between me and the Redwood King. It is not related to the Zhenwu holy place. Thus, regardless of winning or losing, please do not make a move. If Wushuang Wuning loses, I would be grateful if you could protect the Qin family. The martial saint was touched by Qin Wushuang's righteousness and courage. He nodded, Okay, Qin Wushuang, regardless of the result of this battle, as long as I'm alive, I will protect the Qin family and not let them suffer any grievances. When Qin Wushuang saw that the martial saint had agreed, he no longer had any worries. He slowly walked out of the door and said lightly, Li Wuji, I will wait for you at the martial arts practice field. As he spoke, he moved his feet and used the immortal virtuous cloud steps. His speed was so fast that he moved like a ghost, appearing and disappearing. Like the wind and smoke, he was hard to find. Wherever he went, a powerful aura would spread out. This chi became stronger each time. In the end, it shocked the entire audience and made them look at each other in astonishment. From Qin Wushuang's figure, they felt a completely different chi than a pre-sky realm warrior. Vaguely, this chi could only be found on the martial saint, and that Li Wuji. Upper sky? In everyone's eyes, waves of astonishment exploded. Amidst this astonishment, their emotions were completely different. Of course, those who were ecstatic were the people of the Qin family and the powerhouses that were on good terms with the Qin family. Those who were shocked and self-reflecting belonged to those powerhouses that were still hesitating whether to obey the Qin's rule or not. And those who were completely terrified and horrified belonged to all the people of the Redwood Mansion. Including the Redwood King from his pair of eyes, there was deep confusion, fear, and despair. Qin Wushuang was an upper sky. Even the martial saint had not expected this. He even felt somewhat ashamed that after being here for so long, he could not see that Qin Wushuang had entered the upper sky realm. It was enough to show that this Qin Wushuang had hidden his upper sky realm presence perfectly. As soon as he thought about it, of course, he understood why Qin Wushuang had hidden his upper sky realm presence. When he saw everyone's expression, he roughly knew that the royal Qin family would use different strategies to deal with different powerhouses in the future. In Li Wuji's eyes, a strong murderous intent flashed. With a light sneer, he also flew out with the tip of his foot. Upper sky, apparently, he had also seen through Qin Wushuang's upper sky realm presence. Such a young upper sky realm had appeared in a subordinate country. This was not something that Li Wuji could tolerate. For such a figure, if he did not kill him while he was still in the cradle, in the future, he would become a big trouble, especially under the situation where both parties had formed a grudge against each other. It would be a slow suicide to allow such a figure to grow. Thus, a moment ago, he had made up his mind. Regardless of the cost, he would kill Qin Wushuang. Suddenly, the two upper sky figures flashed and disappeared before everyone's eyes. The martial saint turned around and glanced at the Redwood King. He sneered, "Redwood King, you colluded with the enemy and led the wolf into the house. You should be executed immediately. However, for this matter, it's more appropriate to wait for Qin Wushuang to do it." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his arms slightly and pointed his finger twice in the air. Chi 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 chi. After a few sounds, the Redwood King and the other two stage 9 experts fell to the ground. "Purple Robe, you are responsible for taking care of the rest of the small fries." The martial saint's tone was indifferent. He did not care about the stage 8 elders at all. The Purple Robe Great Honored Warrior had just recovered from his shock. Hearing the martial saint's order, he quickly replied, "Yes." The martial saint waved his hand. "I will go out and take a look." After he finished speaking, his figure floated as if he had suddenly disappeared from his original spot, disappearing without a trace. On the training field, Li Wuji's entire body was like a sharpened knife, releasing a murderous aura to his heart's content. A battle between upper sky realm experts was different from a battle between lower sky realm experts. It was not as simple as a close combat. Aura, momentum, and upper sky realm aura were all part of a battle. If one could not suppress the opponent's aura, a battle between upper sky realm experts would only end in defeat. On the other hand, although Qin Wushuang did not have any experience in upper sky realm battles, his rich experience in pre-sky realm battles and his indomitable personality meant that he was destined to fight for every inch of land. The wave of anger inside Qin Wushuang's heart was no less than Li Wuji's. In fact, he was even more furious. How could he not know that this time, Li Wuji had come with the goal of destroying the entire Qin family? If that was the case, how could Qin Wushuang hold back? Kill. Only by killing could he dispel the hatred in his heart and intimidate the small fries in all directions. To establish the prestige of the royal Qin family, nothing was more suitable than killing an upper sky realm warrior. As long as he killed Li Wuji, Not to mention that no one in the heavenly royal territory would dare to harbor any thoughts of betrayal. Even the other royal territories and even the royal family would have to respect the Qin family. Qin Wushuang was determined to fight and did not back down. He kept urging his upper sky realm aura to confront Li Wuji. He was waiting for Li Wuji to make the first move. With the agility and convenience of the coagulated sword, even if he attacked later, he would still have enough opportunities to strike first. He would kill Li Wuji. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 133. Li Wuji's whole body was filled with murderous intent. He said coldly, "Qin Wushuang, I admit that I have underestimated you. However, you have obviously just entered the Xiantian realm. If you fight with me, who has been in the Xiantian realm for many years, you will definitely die. The day you enter the Xiantian realm will be the day you die. Do you have any regrets?" This was a loss of momentum and a psychological shock. For Qin Wushuang, this kind of provocation was basically nothing. He had lived 2 lives. If he could be frightened by a few words, he would not have the courage to challenge Li Wuji. He raised his head and laughed. "Li Wuji, your Jiyin sect, other than boasting, don't you have any other skills?" "Humph, I'm just speaking the truth." "What boasting?" Li Wuji shouted and spat out a breath. Suddenly, his body rolled up and his whole body spun at high speed like a top. His palms intertwined and condensed into an attack shape like an awl. He directly poked at Qin Wushuang. This poke was different from any of the fancy martial arts of the post-liminary realm warriors. It was very ordinary. The power of this poke brought out a white ripple like a waterfall. In the blink of an eye, it was in front of Qin Wushuang. Enter the Gui Mei, retreat the Ming Yi. Qin Wushuang's feet moved continuously and accurately stepped on the correct position. His immortal virtuous clouds steps danced in the air, and he barely dodged the incredibly powerful attack. This attack did not hit Qin Wushuang. It directly rushed to the front and hit a stone lock in a martial arts practice field. With a boom, the stone lock suddenly exploded. He was indeed a Xiantian realm warrior. The power of this attack was actually so shocking. Although the attack did not hit, Li Wuji did not seem to take it seriously. It was as if he did not expect to gain any benefits from this attack. If Qin Wushuang could not avoid this attack, then it would be a joke. Only by avoiding this attack would he be qualified to challenge Li Wuji. Li Wuji's body rolled up and white light burst out. Suddenly, a cloud of fog appeared on top of his head. His figure was rolling at high speed, like a long dragon wreaking havoc in the air. It was as if he was creating clouds and rain, swallowing clouds, and spitting out fog. This fog came fiercely. In a moment, it spread out and covered the entire martial arts practice field. It was as if there was a fog. It was impossible to see the other side within 3 meters. Obviously, after that attack, Li Wuji immediately had an idea. He knew that if he wanted to end the battle quickly, he had to make his opponent unable to see the direction of his attack, and then kill him with a strange attack. Only in this way could he achieve the fastest and most. Or else, if that martial saint interfered, most likely it would be more troublesome to kill Qin Wushuang. How could Qin Wushuang not understand the intentions of this Li Wuji? Wuji is a Wuji with Wuji. With Wuji is with Wuji with Wuji. With Wuji his Wuji chi. Wuji is Wuwuji, with Wuwuji. Wuwuk. This was a miraculous prediction ability. Sure enough, after Li Wuji succeeded in setting up the fog, he let out a sharp whistle and continuously pushed his palms forward. Spiritual energy gathered in the center of his palms, and he continuously struck out. This was a very overbearing Xiantian martial art of the Jin sect. It was called Thunder Palm of the Sky. Among the 5 elements, it belonged to the metal element. Metal elemental attacks had unique advantages in terms of dominance, penetration, destruction, and speed. Although Li Wuji couldn't use the thunder palms of the sky, as he wished like his master, Old Man Jiyin, he still managed to hit the target with his palms. None of his attacks missed. His movement technique was like that of a ghost, darting to the east, jumping to the west, sometimes to the south, sometimes to the north. He kept jumping in different directions without any pattern. Although there seemed to be no order, it was actually the best way for Li Wuji to deal with Qin Wushuang. This was because if this kind of speed attack was launched from all directions, it would be less concentrated. However, it was tricky and had the advantage of being able to completely suppress the opponent. Once an encirclement attack was formed, no matter how good the opponent's movement technique was, it would be hard to avoid losing sight of the other side. However, the person who took the initiative to attack was like moving clouds and flowing water. He didn't stick to one pattern at all, making it impossible for the opponent to determine where he would attack from next. Compared to a concentrated attack from one direction, an all-round three-dimensional attack was much more difficult to defend against. It had to be said that Li Wuji was a genius. The judgment he made in such a short period of time was definitely the best way to deal with Qin Wushuang. However, he would never have thought that the immortal ascending cloud steps under Qin Wushuang's feet was the most unreasonable and illogical movement technique. To put it bluntly, the immortal ascending cloud steps was very self-centered. It only walked its own path. It didn't care how the opponent attacked, how strong the attack was, or what the direction of the attack was. No matter how the opponent attacked, his movement technique would still be like a graceful dance. It seemed to be careless, but it was able to dodge the thunder palms that came from all directions. At this moment, the outside of the martial arts practice field was already crowded with people. Although the field was covered in fog, it didn't affect the enthusiasm of the crowd to watch the battle between the innate masters. A battle between innate masters was a battle that they would never be able to witness in their lifetime. Even if it was a stage 9 warrior of the genuine force, even if it was the honorable purple-gowned great honored warrior, their eyes were filled with the desire to learn. They hoped that after witnessing this battle, they would be able to comprehend the Tao of the innate realm. If it wasn't for the martial saints stopping them from entering the encirclement, this group of people would have probably rushed forward. However, if that was the case, the fluctuation of the innate aura could take the lives of a large group of people if they weren't careful. All of you, step back if you don't want to die. The martial saint reprimanded. After being stopped by the martial saint, these people became a little more clear-headed. The martial saint took the lead and stood at the front. If there was any fluctuation, he would be able to resolve it. These people were all standing behind the martial saint. Their vision was blurry, and they could only see a lightning-fast silhouette darting around. They could not see his specific movements at all, nor could they see the profoundness behind his movements. In a battle between innate masters, just the momentum alone had made them feel throbbing. Everyone knew that once one reached the upper sky level, most likely, it would be a battle to the death. It was because the attacking power of each other was too strong. Shimenyu was also not calm. The degree of shock in his heart did not lose to anyone at the scene. Besides feeling fortunate about his initial choice, he was even more surprised by Qin Wushuang's speed of improvement. He remembered that outside the inn in South Cloud State City, he had fought with Qin Wushuang once. At that time, although Qin Wushuang had tyrannical strength, at most, he was on par with him. However, now, the two Stage 9 elite warriors next to the Redwood King were like ants. They were crushed to death without any resistance. And the insufferably arrogant Redwood King had become a prisoner of the Qin family. One could imagine his fate. Luckily, I didn't choose to become enemies with this son of the Qin family because of a momentary dispute. Or else, perhaps the fate of the Redwood King would be my fate. At least, the Redwood King might still have the royal family to plead for him. If the emperor had stepped out, perhaps he would have a chance to live. And although the Shi Min feudal lords were one of the top powerhouses in the Bayou country, their face could not be compared to the Redwood King. Shi Min made up his mind. No matter what, the Shi Min feudal lords would follow the royal Qin family and the heavenly royal territory wholeheartedly. Initially, Shi Min had guessed that Qin Wushuang had received the spiritual fate. Now, when he saw that Qin Wushuang had entered the upper sky realm, he was also proud of his foresight. Nangong Xian, the patriarch of the Nangong feudal lords of the Green Tree State, was also feeling complicated. He was also an elite warrior at stage 9 of the genuine force. He had always heard that the upper sky realm and the pre-sky realm were completely different. Now, after seeing it with his own eyes, he knew that the rumors were not false. The reality was even more exaggerated than the rumors. To put it bluntly, even if 10 stage 9 warriors of a genuine force attacked together, they would not be able to do anything to an upper sky realm warrior. And if an upper sky realm warrior wanted to kill a stage 9 warrior of the genuine force, it would be as easy as blowing off dust. After all, a pre-sky realm warrior would not be able to imagine the method of taking someone's life from a distance of 20 or 30 meters. 4 pre-sky realm warriors, even if they were at stage 9 of the genuine force, the power they generated came from the internal strength of their body. No matter how strong a person's power was, in the end, there was a limit. And for upper sky realm warriors, they had the huge universe as their energy storage. It was inexhaustible. Big brother to Shi, do you think Wushuang can win? Qin Xiu had always been confident in her little brother. However, at this moment, she could not help but feel worried. Inwardly, the Shiming was also not confident. Yet, he comforted her. Wushuang is also an upper sky realm warrior. When has Wushuang ever lost to an upper sky realm warrior at the same level? On the other hand, Qin Lianshan could not stop wringing his hands. Apparently, he was also extremely nervous. On one hand, he was happy that Wushuang had entered the upper sky realm. On the other hand, he was worried. After all, even the martial saint was wary of Li Wuji's power. Even if Wushuang had entered the upper sky realm, he was still new. As his father, he did not have much confidence that he could win against Li Wuji. Just when everyone was observing with rapt attention and their minds were in a mess, Li Wuji suddenly screamed and retreated to the back. He looked at Qin Wushuang with disbelief. His hair was messy. Apparently, a part of his hair had been cut off. Most of the people outside did not know what had happened. They could not see what had happened in the clouds. However, when they heard Li Wuji scream, they knew that he had not gained any advantage. Only the martial saint, with his deep eyes, had clearly seen Li Wuji's sorry state. However, as for how Li Wuji's hair had been cut off, even he, an upper sky realm warrior, did not see it clearly. In the next moment, the martial saint saw Qin Wushuang slowly walk out from the clouds. His expression was still cold. From his face, there was no sign of victory or defeat. Li Wuji stood still. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at Qin Wushuang. He was already on full alert. There was no longer any trace of mockery and disdain. Instead, it was replaced with caution and caution. There was even a trace of fear that was hard to detect. P.S. Today, I will definitely update 5 chapters. I will definitely make this Li Wuji lose his head. Not only will I destroy him, I will destroy him cleanly. If brothers feel good, please continue to vote for this book. No matter what the vote is, Wushuang will not reject it. I will continue to write. There are still 2 more chapters. It will definitely not be later than 21:30. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 134. Li Wuji, you claim to have entered the upper sky realm many years ago, and this is all you have? Then next year today will be your death anniversary. Qin Wushuang took a step forward. Li Wuji laughed strangely, but the shock in his heart couldn't be described with words. The thunder palm of the sky was indeed an upper sky combat skill that he had inherited from his teacher, and its power was not to be underestimated. The so-called upper sky combat skill wasn't something that could be easily obtained. Even the Jin sect had very few upper sky combat skills. Sometimes a good upper sky combat skill could even decide the life and death of 2 upper sky realm experts of the same level. If an upper sky combat skill was strong, even if the natural energy absorbed by the body was weaker, it could still be used to defeat the opponent. It was one thing to absorb the natural energy of the upper sky realm, but it was another thing to use the natural energy of the upper sky realm. How to use the natural energy of the upper sky realm belonged to the upper sky realm. Although Li Wuji was the eldest disciple of Old Man Ji-in, he had only inherited two upper sky combat skills. One was the Thunder Palm of the Sky, and the other was the Thunder Wind Blade that he had yet to use. The Thunder Wind Blade, as its name suggested, was a blade technique, and a blade technique naturally required the use of a blade. Li Wuji concentrated for a moment, then rubbed his hands together. Using some unknown magic, a curved blade that was emitting white light appeared in his hands. The blade radiated light, especially the edge of the blade, which emitted waves of cold light. It had an aura that made people feel cold just by looking at it. With one look, one could tell that it had drunk a lot of blood to reach such a terrifying realm. When the martial saint saw Li Wuji take out his weapon, he was shocked and shouted, "Be careful, Wu Shuang." After fighting with Li Wuji for so long, Qin Wu Shuang had roughly figured out what kind of realm upper sky realm Li Wuji was at. In terms of upper sky spiritual energy, he wouldn't lose to Li Wuji at all. He might even be richer than Li Wuji. Although he didn't know the reason behind it, he was sure that his natural energy was richer than Li Wuji's. To put it simply, his foundation was stronger than Li Wuji's. With a solid foundation, coupled with the immortal ascending cloud steps, no matter how Li Wuji changed, even if he used 10 sets of innate battle skills and turns, the result would still be the same. This was because he could only change his combat skills, but his own spiritual energy could not increase too much in a short period of time. Therefore, no matter how many changes there were, it was still the same. As long as the immortal ascending cloud steps did not make any mistakes, no matter how Li Wuji changed, he would always be in an invincible position. This was because the other party did not have an overwhelming advantage in terms of cultivation level. In fact, the other party's cultivation level was not even as profound as his. The reason why Qin Wushuang chose to defend was mainly because he didn't understand the battle between innates. Hence, he wanted to use this opportunity to familiarize himself with the key points of the battle between innates. From the looks of it now, whether it was innate stage or acquired stage, after a real fight, one still had to rely on strength, movement techniques, skills, and improvisation. Innate and acquired martial arts were of the same origin after all, and their principles were interlinked. After understanding this point, Qin Wushuang suddenly felt as if he had experienced hundreds of innate battles. His mind was suddenly filled with many new insights. He calmly stepped forward and looked at the scimitar in Li Wuji's hand. He sneered and said, "Li Wuji, I can't use my hands, but you can't use your scimitar either." Li Wuji sneered and said, "Whether I can or not, you should have a taste first." Li Wuji's personality was cold and bloodthirsty. Once he started his battle mode, he would definitely be incomparably fierce. The scimitar spun and slashed towards Qin Wushuang's head like a splitting wind. This blade technique was called Thunder Wind Blade. As the name suggested, its momentum was like wind and thunder. Every slash of the blade faintly contained the sound of wind and thunder, shaking the heavens and earth. Its momentum was astonishing. This blade technique focused on momentum and was very domineering. It was very compatible with Li Wuji's personality. Hence, Old Man Jiyin chose to impart this blade technique to him and gave him an innate battle blade. However, Li Wuji's previous strategy was to quickly kill Qin Wushuang. Hence, he used the Thunder Palms and not the Thunder Wind Blade. This caused him to not use the Thunder Wind Blade when his momentum was at its peak. Hence, when he used it when his momentum was at its peak, its power naturally couldn't reach its peak. Although his temperament appeared ferocious, Qin Wushuang still walked casually. Moving left and right, he used his immortal virtuous cloud steps and turned a deaf ear to Li Wuji's Thunder Wind Blade. At this moment, Li Wuji felt as if he was cutting water with his blade. Every slash was full of strength, but it was useless. No matter how strong his blade was, it couldn't stop the flow of water. He really had some doubts. Did this Qin Wushuang really just enter the innate realm recently? His footwork didn't seem strange or unusual. However, his swaying left and right posture actually caused every slash of his blade to hit nothing. It was as if this was a rehearsal between the two of them and not a real battle of life and death. Powerlessness. At this moment, Li Wuji's greatest feeling was a sense of powerlessness. He was very confident that as long as his opponent made a wrong move, his blade would hit him. Even if it was just a graze, he would definitely be seriously injured and his head would be chopped off. However, he had slashed more than 100 times in a few breaths, but he still couldn't make up for the difference of a single step. It was as if his opponent didn't even care about his innate level saber and his thunder wind innate level blade technique. All his footwork seemed to have been prearranged. Every step was so calm that it almost drove him crazy. Perhaps, even if he started practicing this footwork in his mother's womb, he wouldn't be able to reach such a level of proficiency. However, Li Wuji couldn't find a flaw in this footwork, no matter how hard he tried. With the current situation, Li Wuji had no choice but to bite the bullet. At this point, if Li Wuji withdrew from the battle, his momentum would weaken and he wouldn't be able to withstand his opponent's counterattack. Even if he didn't want to, he had to. He could only bite the bullet and continue. Let's see how long this brat can last. Li Wuji made up his mind. With 2 whistling sounds, his blade changed and became even faster. Qin Wushuang was still unhurried, giving others the feeling that he was just taking a stroll and not engaging in a battle of life and death with Li Wuji. Seeing this, the martial saint couldn't help but admire Qin Wushuang's patience. For someone who had just entered the innate level to be able to remain so calm, it was indeed not easy. One had to know that people who had just entered the innate level were usually very confident in themselves and had a strong desire to battle. To be so focused on defending, one wouldn't be able to do it unless one had strong self-discipline. Qin Wushuang's character was steady, but he didn't lack passion. He definitely wasn't the kind of person who would defend till the end. On the contrary, Qin Wushuang's character had a very firm persistence, a kind of aggressiveness that would definitely explode at a certain stage. Qin Wushuang definitely has some tricks up his sleeve. His footwork and spiritual power are all on the path of the innate level, as if he has been cultivating for a long time. So experienced. Then, how could he lack offensive skills? Now, Li Wuji's temperament has not weakened. Indeed, he can still grind him down. When Li Wuji's temperament starts to decline, he will attack him. Killing Li Wuji would not be an empty promise. The martial saint could see the big picture from one small clue. After watching this move, he could already predict many of the following moves. He could tell that Li Wuji's saber skill was not to be underestimated. Fortunately, Qin Wushuang's footwork seemed to be a natural counter to Li Wuji's technique. Regardless of how Li Wuji changed, he would always remain unchanged. Perhaps, after this battle, Qin Wushuang will become famous. It seems that my little pond in the Bayou country cannot contain this dragon. The martial saint felt extremely complicated. He remembered that a while ago, on the Martial Saint Mountain, he had thought of taking Qin Wushuang as his disciple and letting him inherit the position of the martial saint. Now, thinking about it, he had been too arrogant. With his current strength, how could he be Qin Wushuang's teacher? To put it bluntly, if he were in Li Wuji's position, most likely he would not be in a better situation than Li Wuji. However, when he saw Qin Wushuang's bravery, the martial saint also felt extremely gratified. At least, the Bayou country now had 2 upper sky warriors. In this aspect, it was enough to suppress all the surrounding middle-ranking subordinate countries. Especially their sworn enemy, the Great Wu, would no longer pose a threat to the Bayou country. Apparently, Qin Wushuang's future was not at this level. Perhaps the initial stage of the spiritual martial force was only his starting point. Perhaps the martial saint could not even see the edge of the true peak. If one had to describe Qin Wushuang's future, it would be limitless. It would be limitless and unpredictable. This was a young man that even the martial saint was fascinated by and unable to catch. At such a young age, and coming from a humble class background, he had broken through continuously. Each of his steps had made people dumbfounded, until he had reached the martial saint mountain. Until now, he had entered the upper sky. Each step was enough for others to strive for their entire life. However, he had achieved it when he was only in his teens. Li Wuji. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang's voice came from the middle of the field. Qin Lianshan and his family were overjoyed. They could hear that Wushuang's tone was still calm. At least, it meant that he could still hold on, and the situation was not bad. I already said, if this is all you have, then next year today will be your death anniversary. As soon as Qin Wushuang had finished speaking, he suddenly initiated his temperament. Instantly, the upper sky spiritual qi from his entire body spread out and rushed towards Li Wuji. The competition of temperament was a must for upper sky warriors to compete. As soon as he initiated his temperament, it was like two tigers meeting. Of course, the more aggressive one would go forward, and the weaker one would retreat. Qin Wushuang's incantation contained a strong upper sky spiritual qi. It penetrated through the fog, and even the martial saint's mind was slightly affected. The pre-sky realm warriors' faces were ashen. They felt an indescribable pressure in their chests and wanted to vomit. Li Wuji's mind was affected by this incantation, and his saber technique became sluggish. Qin Wushuang saw it clearly. He took a step forward and pointed his left thumb forward. A red light, like a beast that had been suppressed for a long time, rushed out of its cage and rushed towards Li Wuji with an unstoppable momentum. Coagulated sword. Invincible. 1 hour later, the 5th chapter will be delivered on time. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support legal reading. Chapter 135. Li Wuji didn't see any weapon in Qin Wushuang's hands, but he felt the fiery sword aura shooting towards him. He panicked and used his Thunderwind blade to block. Dang! The crisp sound of metal colliding. Qin Wushuang wouldn't allow him to dodge. He attacked with both hands, the thumb of his left hand holding the little Shang sword, and the middle finger of his right hand holding the middle rushing sword. The two wings flew together, like two dragons playing with a pearl, two tigers fighting for food. In an instant, the sword aura was everywhere, causing Li Wuji to be in dire straits. However, once the momentum is lost, defeat is only a matter of time in a battle between Xiantians. As for Qin Wushuang, he was well versed in the art of war. The first burst of energy, the second burst of energy, and the third burst of energy. After Li Wuji finished his 3 moves, his momentum had reached the stage of the second burst of energy and the third burst of energy. As for Qin Wushuang, he had just started his attack and was at the stage of the first burst of energy. This was the stage where the momentum was the strongest. Only by killing Li Wuji in one fell swoop at this stage could the battle be decided. Otherwise, the two would enter a new round of tug-of-war. Qin Wushuang and Li Wuji had already completely grasped the initiative. How could he be willing to drag the battle endlessly? With a long roar, he used his Xiantian spiritual energy to strengthen his momentum. The lion's roar technique, coupled with the coagulated sword in his hands, increased its power. After 3 bursts of sword aura, Li Wuji snorted. His left shoulder had already been hit by the middle rushing sword in his right hand. His entire arm seemed to have been cut off by a sharp blade, falling off with a swoosh. As his arm fell off, blood spurted out. Whether it was Xiantian or Houtian, the physical body was the same. With the arm gone, his battle power would be greatly reduced. Li Wuji shouted and retreated a few steps, screaming, "Stop!" Qin Wushuang smiled maliciously. How could he allow Li Wuji to stop? Today, even if you have 100 gene tokens, don't even think about escaping death. Qin Wushuang didn't show any mercy. His fingertips were like flowers, moving freely. His sword aura was perfect and every move was tyrannical and unparalleled real sword realm. This attack was no different from Li Wuji's Wind and Thunderblade. It was equivalent to an incomparably powerful innate weapon. Therefore, even though Li Wuji didn't see any weapons in Qin Wushuang's hands, he still felt as if he was being chased by thousands of swords. After losing an arm, Li Wuji's movements were obviously affected, making it even more inconvenient for him. Qin Wushuang's every move landed on him. Puchi! Puchi! With a crisp cutting sound, Li Wuji's right arm was chopped off as well. Li Wuji let out a shrill howl and shouted hysterically, "Qin Wushuang, if you kill me, you will regret it." Regret? Qin Wushuang's tone had a hint of malevolence. When I, Qin Wushuang, do something, I never regret it. Only you are allowed to kill my entire family, and I cannot kill you? Tell me, is there such a logic in this world? Inwardly, Li Wuji complained incessantly as he knew that today's matter would not end easily. He shouted, "If you kill me, my teacher will not let it go. If you had angered my teacher, not to mention your Qin family, the entire subordinate country would suffer a calamity. My teacher will not stop until he kills millions of your people." Qin Wushuang said coldly, "Even if your teacher can kill 100 million people, don't even think about forcing me to let you go. Today, I will kill you like a dog. In the future, I will kill old man Ji-in like a pig. If your Ji-in sect wants to kill my entire family, then you deserve to die. Even if old man Jin doesn't come, I will. I will kill all of you." When Li Wuji saw Qin Wushuang's almost crazy expression, he knew that this person's murderous intent had already been awakened and could not be changed. He would not be able to move him with his words. Eager to survive, he shouted loudly, "Your Excellency, martial sage, you should know what kind of temper my master, old man Jiyin, has. Hurry and ask Qin Wushuang to stop, or else don't blame me for not reminding you." The martial saint muttered to himself. He knew that Li Wuji was not bluffing. Being the head disciple of old man Jiyin, if he were to die in the Bayou country, old man Jiyin would indeed come to the Bayou to avenge him. By that time, without thinking, it would be an unprecedented bloody storm. When he thought here, he could not help but say, "Wushuang." Qin Wushuang had already made up his mind as he said in a clear voice, "Martial saint, you don't need to persuade me." Then he raised his voice. "Before the battle with Li Wuji, I already said it. This is the continuation of the grudge between me and the Redwood King. Now, it only extends to the Jin sect. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Therefore, killing Li Wuji is a must." After he had finished, he sped up with both hands and moved his sword continuously. Each sword move was like a deadly bullet that hit the target and penetrated Li Wuji's vital points. Li Wuji screamed miserably. Instantly, thousands of holes appeared on his body as blood gushed out. He opened his eyes wide, and even in death, his eyes were filled with ruthlessness and viciousness. Apparently, he had died with extreme unwillingness. "Qin Wushuang, you will regret this." These were Li Wuji's last words. However, as a loser, these last words were only a pale and powerless joke. As soon as Li Wuji died, all the fog around him retreated. Once again, the entire martial arts arena became clear and bright. Under the bright sun, Li Wuji's body fell to the ground with thousands of holes. That insufferably arrogant upper sky realm warrior had died like this. Inwardly, most of the people felt a sense of regret at the impermanence of the world. What an upper sky realm warrior not have? The power of the secular world, the pursuit of martial arts, they were all blessed by the heavens. Why did they have to take things too hard and participate in such boring battles? Why did they lose their lives in vain? When they thought about how an upper sky realm warrior had died earlier than them, a subtle feeling emerged in the hearts of those guests. The way everyone looked at Qin Wushuang had become completely different. The current Qin Wushuang was no longer that martial arts student who had won first place in the exam, nor was he some marquis Wushuang. Instead, it was an upper sky realm warrior, one that could stand shoulder to shoulder with a martial saint. Qin Lianshan was overjoyed at this turn of events. He walked up and looked at the body on the ground with disbelief. He felt as if he was in a dream. This was too shocking, and it had tested their endurance. Ever since Li Wuji had appeared, Qin Lianshan had had an ominous premonition. He had been in a state of panic. He did not expect that the martial saint had arrived first, and then his son had dragged out the Redwood King and killed his 2 guards. Unexpectedly, the following scene was even more miraculous. His son had challenged that Upper Sky Realm warrior and won like a dream. And his son was also an Upper Sky Realm warrior. Everything had happened too suddenly. The great ups and downs had also caused his mood to rise and fall a few times. This fluctuation had made him feel as if his entire body was about to collapse. Those guests all came up to congratulate him. Their tone was full of respect for the Upper Sky Realm warrior. Even if they were flattering him, it did not sound so unreal. After all, an Upper Sky Realm warrior deserved all their praise. On the other hand, the martial saint was still calm. After all, this was not the first time he had seen such a scene. He smiled and greeted Wu Shuang. Qin Wu Shuang looked at this kind elder and said apologetically, "Martial saint, I did not listen to your advice and killed Li Wuji. Please forgive me." The martial saint laughed and did not seem to mind. He said seriously, "Wu Shuang, now, you are also an Upper Sky Realm warrior. You don't need to call me senior or junior. My family name is Chiao. You can call me Brother Chiao or Big Brother Chiao, but you can't call me senior anymore. Don't say this and that. This is how it is between Upper Sky Realm warriors. Also, you are now an Upper Sky Realm warrior. You are qualified enough to do anything. You don't need to consider my feelings. Whether you killed Li Wuji or not is up to you. My advice to you is to consider my position. And with your personality, you would rather break than bend. You killed Li Wuji to maintain your strong aura. I can understand. The martial saint was so reasonable that it made Qin Wu Shuang blush with shame. He opened his mouth and was about to say something, but the martial saint waved his hand. Wu Shuang, don't be so polite. You killed Li Wuji, so he must have a lot of good things on him. These are all your spoils of war. There was an unwritten rule between Upper Sky Realm warriors. If one of them died after a great battle, then the things on him would be taken by the one who killed him. And an Upper Sky Realm warrior must have some good things on him. These things would cause a crazy fight for them in front of any warrior in the secular world. Not to mention other things. If Li Wuji's Upper Sky Battle Blade was given to a Stage 9 warrior of the genuine force, then other Stage 9 warriors would be killed for sure. This was the privilege of an Upper Sky Realm warrior. Even the most ordinary thing on him would be a rare treasure in the hands of a warrior in the secular world. Hearing the martial saint's words, Qin Wu Shuang didn't hold back. He opened Li Wuji's bag and found a few things as expected. There was a wind and thunder blade technique, a thunder palm of the sky mental cultivation method, and a simple Dan recipe. There were also a few unknown herbs. Just by looking at them, one could tell that they were heavenly treasures that couldn't be compared to any herbs in the secular world. Apart from these things, Li Wuji's Upper Sky Battle Blade was naturally Qin Wu Shuang's. Although Qin Wu Shuang didn't use a blade, he didn't plan to give this Upper Sky item to anyone for the time being. After all, if this item fell into the hands of a warrior in the secular world, it would be like tying a bomb to him. It could explode at any time and bring disaster to himself. The martial saint was also very tactful and didn't ask Qin Wu Shuang what he got. On the other hand, Qin Wu Shuang was very calm and gave him a rough explanation. The martial saint nodded. Li Wuji's Upper Sky battle technique can't deal with you, so it shouldn't be of much value to you. However, Upper Sky battle techniques are always valuable. You can keep it. In the future, you can exchange it for skills you need. As for the Dan recipe, when the martial saint said this, his tone suddenly became extremely envious. That's a rare thing. Wu Shuang, I have a presumptuous request. Can you let me make a copy of this Dan recipe? What's so hard about it? Qin Wu Shuang didn't think it was a problem and agreed generously. The martial saint sighed inwardly. After all, this Qin Wu Shuang had just entered the Upper Sky realm and didn't know many things. For your information, If this Dan recipe was given to other Upper Sky Realm experts, they wouldn't give it up even if they had to pay with their lives. The dragon and tiger body sculpting pellet could change one's body and remodel one's body to be able to bear 20% of the natural power. This was a necessary step to enter the middle stage from the initial stage of the spiritual martial force. Today at 5 p.m., I have finally fulfilled my promise. So tired, haha, but I'm very happy. I hope you will like it and let Li Tian feel your passion. If you like it, then vote for this book. During the monthly votes period for new books, each vote is very important. What will the next 5 chapters be? Let me prepare a bit more. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 136. After the battle with Li Wuji, Qin Wushuang's gains were not as simple as the martial arts and Dan recipes he had acquired from Li Wuji. The biggest gain was the experience. Although it was only one battle with an Upper Sky, he had fully understood the mysteries of the battle between Upper Sky Realm experts. It was different from the battle between the Pre-Sky Realm experts, but it was the continuation of the battle between the Pre-Sky Realm experts. This battle had given Qin Wushuang a strong sense of confidence. It was a unique confidence that was different from any other time. This confidence came from winning against a powerful Upper Sky Realm opponent. After this battle, Qin Wushuang also understood how powerful an Upper Sky Realm warrior was. If he had not reached the Upper Sky Realm, what would the fate of the royal Qin family be? Even if the family had accumulated many Stage 9 genuine force warriors, they would not be able to stop Li Wuji from slaughtering the entire family. One Upper Sky Realm warrior was better than 10 Stage 9 genuine force warriors. With this understanding, Qin Wushuang pondered inwardly. In the entire royal Qin mansion, the one with the most hope to reach the Upper Sky Realm was naturally his brother-in-law, de Ming. Although his father had undergone a complete transformation with the classics of tendon changing, his talent was not as good as de Ming's. His body functions were also not as good as the young de Ming. If he had to nurture an Upper Sky Realm warrior, his brother-in-law would be the most suitable. However, this was only a plan. Currently, de Ming was only about to reach Stage 6 of the genuine force. He was still far from the peak of Stage 9. Not to mention breaking through the shackles of Stage 9 to reach the Upper Sky Realm. This was a long-term plan. Once another Upper Sky Realm warrior appeared in the Qin family, he could go out and explore with more ease. The fate of the royal Qin family would not be in such a precarious situation. Killing Li Wuji had somewhat affected Qin Xiu and de Ming's wedding. However, the purple-robed, great honored warrior clearly knew how to adjust the atmosphere. He called the killing of an Upper Sky Realm warrior as an auspicious omen. The guests all agreed. This time, everyone no longer had any hesitation and followed the royal Qin family wholeheartedly. Regardless of the Shimin feudal lords or the Nangong feudal lords, they had fully realized that the rise of the heavenly royal territory was inevitable. Currently, the Redwood King had led the wolf into the house and colluded with foreign enemies to deal with the Qin. Since he had become a prisoner of the Qin, he believed that the day of his death would not be far away. 2 Upper Sky had witnessed the crime committed by the Redwood King. Most likely, even the Emperor of the Bayou could not ask for mercy. Besides, the Emperor of the Bayou country might not have a good impression of the ambitious Redwood King. Now that the Redwood King was captured, it might be to his advantage. The wedding was held as scheduled, and guests from all over the place offered their congratulations and generous gifts. For a moment, both the host and the guest were happy, as if nothing had happened. Although the guests were not used to the absence of the Redwood King's group, the nobles who had been bullied by the Redwood King in the past couldn't help but gloat and feel refreshed. The only flaw was that they couldn't disdain the Redwood King's face and hit him when he was down. After the wedding banquet ended, the guests began to leave. The martial saint called out to Qin Wushuang. Clearly, he had some doubts in his heart. Qin Wushuang knew that the martial saint must have something to say, and it just so happened that he also had a lot of questions to ask the martial saint. The two Upper Sky Realm warriors walked out of the Qin Manor. The martial saint smiled. "Let's find a remote place to walk around. I'm afraid it would be inconvenient for us to walk on the street." Indeed, if two Upper Sky Realm warriors appeared together, it would be strange if they didn't cause a commotion. Qin Wushuang nodded. "I have a place to go." As he spoke, he led the martial saint towards the Great Song Mountain. When the martial saint stepped into Great Song Mountain, he was somewhat surprised as he asked, "Is this where you usually train?" "Yes. What do you think, Senior Brother Chiu?" Qin Wushuang was not pretentious. Since the martial saint had asked him to address him this way, and stated that it was an unwritten rule among the Upper Sky Realm warriors, of course, he would not mind. The address was only a formality. Respect would not be measured by the address alone. The martial saint praised. "Nice. I didn't expect that this Great Song Mountain would have its own charm. When I walked along the mountain road, I felt at home. It is not much different from my martial saint mountain. Haha, a place that is blessed by heroes, a place that is blessed by heroes." Qin Wushuang knew that the martial saint was praising him out of politeness and smiled. The martial saint pondered for a moment and finally asked, "Wushuang, I am really curious. How did you become an Upper Sky Realm warrior?" That day, at the Martial Saint Mountain, I could clearly feel that you were only at stage 9 of the genuine force, and there were no signs of Upper Sky Realm. The purple-robed Martial Saint's understanding of the Upper Sky Realm was much further than yours. Why did you suddenly become an Upper Sky Realm warrior when he was hesitating? Qin Wushuang had already expected that the Martial Saint would ask this question. In fact, everyone probably had the same question in their minds. Qin Wushuang naturally would not tell him about the mysterious experience in the cave. After all, he had only walked around the cave once. There were too many unknown questions waiting for him to explore. He did not want to reveal this secret so early. Senior Brother Chiu, to be honest, I also have some hindsight on how to enter the Upper Sky Realm. A few days ago, I suddenly realized that my attack power had increased greatly. When I tried to attack from a distance, I could actually attack the flying bats 20 to 30 meters away. Only then did I realize. As for how to break through, I remember that one day when I was cultivating in the mountains, I suddenly experienced a dreamlike adventure. Immediately, he didn't conceal anything and describe his experience in a simple manner. He didn't mention the 5-colored light, the cave within the precipitous cliff, or the suction force produced by the Earth's core. As for the location, he simply skipped over it. When the martial saint heard this, he did not have any doubts and only sighed. After a while, he said, "Wushuang, I guess that you should have spiritual roots. Or else, it would be impossible for you to suddenly awaken and enter the Upper Sky Realm. If you did not have spiritual roots, you would have to go through the process of breaking through to the Upper Sky Realm. No one could be an exception." Spiritual roots? Qin Wushuang was also surprised. This question would probably become an eternal mystery. Whether or not one had spiritual roots could only be tested before entering the Upper Sky Realm. Now that he had entered the Upper Sky Realm, naturally, there was no way to test his spiritual roots, and there was no need to test it. That's right, you have spiritual roots. There is no mistake about it. Warriors in the pre-sky realm must break through to enter the Upper Sky Realm. And the special experience you mentioned was obviously not breaking through. The process of breaking through was very torturous and could be said to be extremely dangerous. The martial saint was very sure. Qin Wushuang did not care about the spiritual roots. He knew that the reason he could enter the Upper Sky Realm was because of that special experience. Now that he thought about it, why did the 5-colored light suddenly shoot out? It should be because he was practicing the coagulated sword and triggered the sign of the Upper Sky Realm, thus forming some kind of special resonance. This was only Qin Wushuang's guess. As for the specifics, it would probably be an eternal mystery. Brother Chiu, this way, entering the Upper Sky Realm. Are there only 2 ways to go? There is absolutely no third way. Qin Wushuang asked thoughtfully. It's not 100% absolute. In the world of elite warriors, there are always some special encounters. For example, some kind of powerful external force. However, those were all too vague and illusory, and there was no reference value. Normally, it would be these two. Legend has it that above the spiritual martial force, there are even more powerful and mysterious realms. Those who have reached those realms all have the ability to turn stone into gold. Think about it. If you were to receive the external force from those elite warriors, entering the upper sky realm would be as easy as blowing off dust. The martial saint smiled bitterly. Those are all mythical existences. In the upper sky realm, no one can use their own power to help others enter the upper sky realm. The only thing they can do is to shorten the time and reduce the risk of entering the upper sky realm. They can even avoid these risks and reduce the difficulty. Oh, what do you mean? Qin Wushuang's interest was greatly increased. It's very simple. For example, the dragon and tiger body sculpting pill you got from Li Wuji is an external force pill that can shorten the time, reduce the risk, and reduce the difficulty. The martial saint sighed. This is also why I want to make a copy. Using the external force of the pill to strengthen the body and reduce the time needed to train the body, so the body can quickly become strong and bear the power of nature. Qin Wushuang also understood after the martial saint's explanation. The martial saint nodded. That's right. For this dragon and tiger body sculpting pill, if an initial stage upper sky realm warrior could get one, it could reduce the time needed to train the body by 15 to 30 years. And when the body absorbs 20% of the natural power, its ability to withstand pressure would greatly increase. The stronger the body's endurance, the lower the risk of being eroded by the natural qi. This principle was not difficult to explain. The difficult part was how to get this type of upper sky pill. Regardless of whether it was the pill recipe, the technique of alchemy, or the materials for alchemy, every single one of them could be said to be extremely difficult to find. Being the head disciple of old man Ji Yin, Li Wuji had not collected all the materials for making the pill. The materials he had collected were all auxiliary raw materials. He lacked the main materials to make the dragon and tiger body sculpting pill. Senior Brother Chio, then if a pre-sky realm warrior wants to break into the initial stage, can this dragon and tiger body sculpting pill be used? The martial saint immediately shook his head with a serious tone. Absolutely not. In the upper sky realm, each level has a strict division. This dragon and tiger body sculpting pill is only suitable for an initial stage upper sky realm warrior. Indeed, it is made for them. It would also be useless for a middle stage warrior, as the effect would not be enough. If a stage 9 pre-sky realm warrior were to take it, the effect would be too tyrannical. I'm afraid that their blood would boil, and their meridians would explode, and they would die. This way, if a pre-sky realm warrior wants to break into the upper sky realm, they must use other pills to make up for it. Of course, only that level of pill formula is also hard to find. When it comes to the upper sky realm, everything is precious, especially in our Bayou country, where the spiritual qi is weak and we do not have enough spiritual materials. The chances of making the body sculpting pill or upper sky initial stage pill is next to nothing. Or else, our Bayou country would not have only had one upper sky realm warrior for a few hundred years. Hearing the words of the martial saint, Qin Wushuang was somewhat disappointed. However, he did not feel hopeless. At least, in terms of the general direction, he had already grasped some basic knowledge of the upper sky realm. These were all precious treasures. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 137. The martial saint had mentioned that the most suitable pills for pre-sky realm warriors to enter the upper sky initial stage were the golden body pill and the upper sky initial stage pill. Although the recipes for these pills were hard to find and the raw materials were hard to collect, they would not be more difficult than the dragon and tiger body sculpting pill. It did not matter that the Bayou country was located in a remote place with weak spiritual qi and insufficient spiritual materials. In the future, he would not just wander around the tiny Bayou country. Qin Wushuang had a higher ambition and a further goal. The Bayou country was only a starting point. At the Jiyin Mountain, old man Ji Yin lightly breathed in and out. He lowered his palm and slowly withdrew his power. A day's worth of cultivation homework was about to come to an end. He had been practicing this in Gui Fian Heart Palm for many years. This evil technique was very powerful, and it consumed a lot of blood and qi during cultivation. It required the continuous replenishment of the blood of virgins from every day of the year to ensure that the blood and qi in the body would not dry up. Over the years, his disciples and their family members had sent countless innocent girls from all the subordinate countries of the Great Luo Empire. They had all been used by old man Ji Yin and had their primordial yin sucked dry. The number was no less than 500. Just the Redwood Mansion in the Bayou country had already provided 200. It was apparent how vicious old man Ji Yin was. After the day's training, old man Ji Yin glanced around the cave. 7 jade tokens were placed in front of him. Suddenly, old man Ji Yin frowned. He rubbed his eyes and looked at the first jade plate in disbelief. Instantly, his face turned cold and the muscles on his face twitched. Instantly, his expression became extremely ferocious. How could this be? Old man Ji Yin looked at that broken jade plate in disbelief. These 7 jade tokens belonged to the 7 Xiantian realm disciples under him. He had extracted the upper sky qi of each upper sky disciple and injected it into this jade plate. Seeing the jade plate was the same as seeing the disciple. Unless the owner of the jade plate had died, the jade plate would never change. At this moment, the first jade pendant was completely shattered. The first jade plate corresponded to his head disciple, Li Wuji. He was also his most valued and most proud disciple. Usually, he would send him to solve any problems. And now, Li Wuji's jade plate had shattered. In other words, Li Wuji was no longer alive. Old man Ji Yin felt a sharp pain in his chest. His eyes flashed with a strong, killing intent. He caressed the broken jade tablet with great care. The muscles on his face twitched even more violently. His head disciple, Li Wuji, had received his Ji Yin command plate and went to the Bayou country. Logically, in a place like the Bayou country, any upper sky disciple could do whatever they wanted. Even the martial saint of the Bayou would not be able to stop him before the Ji Yin commanding plate. This time, he had sent out his eldest disciple, Li Wuji, who was the strongest, the most ruthless, and the most efficient. Originally, he had the intention of ending the battle quickly and returning quickly. Who would have thought that Li Wuji's departure would be an eternal farewell? In this little Bayou country, someone had killed Li Wuji? Old man Ji Yin didn't believe it. Even that martial saint was only an initial stage warrior. At most, he was on par with Li Wuji. If the conditions were good and he had enough momentum, Li Wuji's thunderous wind saber had a chance to cut off his opponent's head. Even if he couldn't do it, at least he wouldn't lose. But why didn't Li Wuji return? Who had killed Li Wuji? Although old man Ji Yin was enraged, he did not lose his sense of propriety. He had always been a cautious person. Since he had founded the Ji Yin sect, naturally, he would not rely on strength to stand tall in the Great Luo Empire. For sure, the person who had killed Li Wuji would not be simple. It would be better if it was a freelance upper sky martial artist. However, if he had encountered a powerful disciple of a sect, or even an elite warrior at the Grandmaster stage, it would be troublesome to seek revenge. At the moment, although revenge was important, the first thing he had to do was to investigate how Li Wuji had died. Anger filled old man Ji Yin's eyes. He Qian, if it weren't for you, how could I have lost my most beloved head disciple? With your talent, if it weren't for your father being a marquis with vast resources, I wouldn't even bother with you. Since Li Wuji died, because of your Redwood Mansion, no matter what, the Redwood Mansion is one of the indirect accomplices of Li Wuji. What he thought here, a wave of rich murderous intent emerged from old man Ji Yin's face. He stood up and walked out of the cave. After sensing for a bit, he found out where He Yu-Qian was. At this moment, He Yu-Qian was in the secret library of the Jiyin sect, searching for a recipe to refine the golden body pellet. Suddenly, the door of the secret library opened. A gust of cold wind blew in, causing the pages of the books to fly in all directions. He Yu-Qian only felt a chill. He turned his head and cried out involuntarily, "Master!" Old man Jiyin was expressionless as he asked indifferently, "What are you doing here?" Seeing his master's indifference, He Yu-Qian felt his scalp tingle. He replied, "Disciple is not cultivating, so I want to find a few books to read and enrich myself." Very good. However, no matter how much you enrich yourself, it will be in vain. Old man Ji Yin's tone was cold. "Master, you?" He Yu-Qian thought his master was joking and could not help but be stunned. "Come out." Old man Ji Yin swung his sleeve and walked out. Arriving at the lawn outside, He Yu-Qian was trembling with fear and trepidation. His heart was like 15 buckets going up and down. How could he not hear that his master's tone was completely different than usual? Only, he could not figure out why his master was unhappy. "Master!" he called out carefully. Old man Jean did not turn his head and asked with an indifferent tone, "In your Bayou country, besides that upper sky from the Marshall Saint Mountain, what other elite warriors do you have?" "Master, in the past 100 years, there was only one upper sky warrior. Besides them, not to mention the upper sky, even those with the potential have not shown themselves." "Master, you know about the Bayou country, that tiny place. Even one upper sky is not enough. Then around the Bayou country, are there any more powerful upper sky than that one?" After a moment of thinking, He Yu-Qian replied, "Around the Bayou country, most of them are middle-ranking subordinate countries. Each country has a martial saint, but their strength is about the same. They are all initial stage warriors, and none of them have the strength of a middle stage warrior. With their potential and lifespan, it's impossible for them to break into the middle stage." Old man Jean nodded. "That's strange." "Strange? Master, what's strange?" Vividly, He Yu-Qian had an ominous feeling. "You don't need to know. He Yu-Qian, in your Redwood mansion, how many people do you have?" Suddenly, Old man Ji Yin changed his tone and asked strangely, "Master, in my Redwood royal family, adding up all the direct descendants, there are at least 500 or 600 people." Although He Yu-Qian felt this question was strange, he did not dare to not answer truthfully. 500 or 600 people. Old man Jean shook his head. "Not enough, not enough." "Then, how many trusted servants do you have in your Redwood mansion?" "There are 3,000 armored soldiers guarding the mansion. As for the internal guards, there are not many. However, each of them is an elite warrior. There are about 200 of them. Too few, too few. The 3,000 armored soldiers are not related to your Redwood mansion. Counting the 500 or 600 disciples of the He family and 200 trusted guards, it's only 700 or 800 people." When he said here, the tone of old man Ji-Yin became colder. "Master, why are you counting this number?" Inwardly, He Yu-Qian was nervous. "If I want to take their heads, of course I have to count them, right?" "What?" He Yu-Qian turned pale with fright and said stutteringly, "Master, are you joking with me?" "Joking?" Old man Ji-Yin's face turned cold. He suddenly turned around and stared coldly at He Yu-Qian. He shouted, "Joking? Do you think a piece of trash like you is qualified for me to joke with you? For the Redwood Mansion, thousands of lives must be sacrificed. Otherwise, it will be hard to get rid of the hatred in my heart. How can I pay tribute to Li Wuji's soul in heaven?" Eldest Marshall brother is dead?" He Yu-Qian cried bitterly in his heart. Only now did he know the cause of this lawsuit. Eldest Marshall brother was dead. No wonder his master asked so many strange questions just now. An unexpected calamity. This was definitely an unexpected calamity. Because of the death of eldest Marshall brother, his master was angry and wanted to kill the people of the Redwood Mansion to get rid of the hatred in his heart. He Yu-Qian knew that old man Ji-Yin was temperamental, but he valued the 7 Xiantian realm disciples more than anything else. He was an extremely protective person. Now that Li Wuji had died, it was normal for him to vent his anger on the Redwood Mansion. The situation was not good. He Yuqian knew that in the next moment, old man Ji Yin would kill him. Suddenly, he had an idea and laughed wantonly. "What are you laughing at?" Old man Ji Yin frowned. "I'm laughing at the pitiful and laughable Redwood Mansion. For so many years, we have been loyal to you and worked hard for you without complaint. Even if we didn't make any contributions, we still worked hard. But now, we are being implicated for no reason. Li Wuji is dead. It must be because he met someone stronger than him. What does it have to do with the Redwood Mansion? Even if it's because you went to solve the problem of the Redwood Mansion, isn't the cause of that problem also related to you? What's the difference between you killing the Redwood Mansion and slapping yourself in the face?" He Yuqian knew that today's matter was unsalvageable. His years of hard work had all gone down the drain. He could not help but feel sorrowful and regretful. He remembered how old man Ji Yin had ignored him and how he had tried his best to curry favor with him. In the end, he had received such a result. How could he not feel sorrowful and angry? Old man Ji Yin sneered. "No matter how eloquent you are, you will not escape from today's disaster. The Redwood Mansion did not do their job well and caused this tragedy. If I don't destroy the Redwood Mansion, how can I have peace of mind? How can I continue to practice the supreme evil techniques? Destroying the Redwood Mansion will start with you." He Yuqian took a few steps back and suddenly said, "Ji Yin, it doesn't matter if you kill me. There is a shocking secret in the Bayou country. You will not learn it." In a moment of desperation, He Yuqian had made it up. However, in old man Ji Yin's ears, it sounded as if it was true. It was because Li Wuji had just died in the Bayou country. Without a doubt, the fact that there were secrets in the Bayou country had hit the bottom of his heart. Secret? Old man Ji Yin frowned. "P.S. Today, I am extremely depressed. The power has been cut off since this morning. Fortunately, I had used the remaining power in my laptop to write 2 chapters. Or else, today's update would have been affected. Today, for sure, there will be 4 chapters. Most likely, the power will still be cut off tomorrow. Thus, the update plan will be the same as today. If the power does not stop tomorrow, then the update will be the same as before. At noon, I will update 1 chapter earlier. Please forgive me for the inconvenience. Today, Li Tian is also like an ant on a hot pan. It's torturous. I am afraid that he will not come tonight. Then, I will be depressed to the point of collapse. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. More chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 138. He Yuqian kept thinking. He knew that his life was already in the hands of old man Ji Yin. Whether he could escape this disaster or not, it all depended on whether this tongue could blossom into a lotus flower. Suddenly, old man Ji Yin laughed evilly, and a trace of mockery emerged from the corner of his mouth. For his observation, most likely, this He Yuqian was playing tricks. It was better to believe it than to not believe it. Old man Ji Yin pointed with his finger and knocked He Yuqian down. Then, he said with a sinister voice, "Regardless of the secret, people of the Redwood King must die. As for you, I will let you live for a few days. When I return from the Bayou country, it will not be too late to take care of you. If I find out that you lied to me, for sure, you will suffer, haha." After he had finished, he picked up He Yuqian and threw him into the cave. Then he sent out his voice, "People of the Ji Yin sect, listen well, I am going out. Guard the mountain gate, I'll be back soon." After he had finished speaking, old man Ji Yin's figure flashed and disappeared without a trace like a ghost. In the imperial capital of the Bayou country, inside the royal palace, the emperor of the Bayou country was feeling somewhat tormented. Everything that had happened at the heavenly royal mansion had already reached his ears. The Redwood King had colluded with foreign forces and tried to deal with the royal Qin family of the heavenly royal territory. If it was only a conflict between the royal families, of course, he could step out to mediate. However, the Redwood King had colluded with foreign enemies, especially those from the mother country. This was a taboo matter. He wanted to beg for mercy, but he could not do so. After all, from the information he had gathered, it was the martial saint that had taken down the Redwood King. And Marquis Wushuang of the Royal Qin was also an upper sky realm warrior. These two reasons had allowed him, the Emperor, to understand the situation and the importance of the matter. It was not that he could not speak, but the effect would be great if he did. Basically, he knew that it would not have any effect. Any of the two upper sky realm warriors could ignore him, the Emperor. Besides, the two upper sky realm warriors held the same position. Most importantly, the Redwood King had colluded with foreign enemies and led the wolf into the house. He deserved the death penalty. Frankly speaking, the Redwood King's arrogance and ambition for the past few years had caused the imperial family to lose their cool. Now that something like this had happened, His Majesty was 70% happy and 30% worried. He was happy that the Redwood King, who was a thorn in their flesh, had finally been pulled out by someone. What he was worried about was that the new royal Qin family had a flourishing momentum and made him, the Emperor, feel somewhat uneasy. The martial saint's intention was very clear. The Redwood King's entire family must be exterminated. Only then would they be able to intimidate those forces that were trying to collude with the outside world and lead the wolf into the house. The execution of the whole family was a very cruel punishment. His Majesty didn't think there was anything wrong with this. However, when the butcher's knife went down, the people who were killed were all descendants of his surname. If this continued, it wouldn't look good for his reputation as an emperor. Therefore, His Majesty's train of thought was clear. He absolutely could not show any signs of soft-heartedness or any intention to plead for leniency. Otherwise, other than asking for a rebuff, it would show that he, the emperor, was weak in terms of decision-making power. On the contrary, if he maintained a tough stance from beginning to end and insisted on strictly investigating the Redwood King's family's responsibility, it would appear that he was on the same side as the two upper sky realm warriors. This way, everything would appear harmonious. His reputation as the emperor would be preserved. The next day, as soon as the emperor spoke, the Redwood King's entire family would be arrested and executed. Qin Wushuang would never let go of the opportunity to beat a drowning dog. For someone like the Redwood King, if he wanted to kill him, he must kill him thoroughly. He must not allow him to have any hope of turning the tables. And exterminating his entire family would be the most thorough method. However, how did the Redwood King manage to invite people from the Jin sect? The Jin sect was a sect from the great Luo Empire, the mother country. It was not something that the Redwood King could curry favor with by sending a few young girls. Certainly, there must be someone who pulled the strings to build the bridge. This person who pulled the strings was very important. According to Qin Wushuang's speculation, it must be related to the Redwood King. If he did not get rid of this person, for sure, he would be a disaster in the future. On this day, Qin Wushuang was returning from the Great Song Mountains. A servant ran out and yelled, "Young master, a few guests want to see you. They have been here for a while." Guests? Yes. I asked them where the guests came from, but they refused to tell me. They would only tell you when they see you. Is the Marquis not here? The Marquis is entertaining them, but they only want to see you. Qin Wushuang nodded. Okay, I know. You can go now. Who could it be that wants to see me? Within the Bayou country, no one would be so ignorant. As long as they saw me, they would not even give face to my father. While Qin Wushuang was thinking, his footsteps remained steady and he was not in a rush. When he arrived at the living room, he already heard 4 breathing sounds. One of them came from his father, and the other 3 were guests. And they should not be familiar guests. When the guests inside saw Qin Wushuang, they were overjoyed. One of them was a stout man in his 50s. The other 2 people were standing on both sides of that stout man. Apparently, they were his left and right arms. When he saw Qin Wushuang, the fat on that stout man's face trembled. He stood up and greeted him with a smile. "Young hero, you have an imposing appearance. I think you must be Marquis Wushuang from the Bayou country." "I wouldn't dare, that's me." There is a saying that one would not hit a smiling person. Although Qin Wushuang was not used to the hospitality of strangers, he was not that ignorant. especially since they were visiting him. He should show some of the demeanor and bearing of a royal. TSK, TSK. Indeed, you're a peerless national scholar. That stout man only smiled wholeheartedly and kept praising him. It was just that the fat on his face made his smile look somewhat comical, and his sincerity was somewhat affected. I wonder where you three are from. Qin Wushuang took a cup of tea from a servant. He took a sip and asked lightly. That stout man was not in a hurry to answer. Instead, he looked around and said, Indeed, this Qin house is a good place to nurture talents. Only, this royal mansion is still too shabby for a young hero like Marquis Wushuang. The royal family of the Bayou country is too stingy. They treat a young hero like this? Qin Wushuang was stunned. From their tone, could it be that these three were not from the Bayou country? Inwardly, Qin Lianshan was also moved. He looked at these three and did not speak. Suddenly, that stout man laughed. Marquis Wushuang should have heard that I am not from the Bayou country. I am not even from any of the subordinate countries under the great Luo Empire. This time, I have come to visit on behalf of the Heavenly Lake Empire to invite Marquis Wushuang. Invite? Qin Wushuang raised his eyebrow and was somewhat confused. That's right, it's an invitation, the stout man said with a fanatical tone. If Marquis Wushuang is willing to come to the Heavenly Lake Empire, not to mention being a king with a different surname, it would not be a problem to give you a subordinate country. Everything would be much better than the Bayou country. Heavenly Lake Empire? Both Qin Wushuang and Qin Lianshan knew that the Heavenly Lake Empire and the Great Luo Empire had always been enemies. Both of them were one of the 9 middle-ranking empires in the Tianxianland. Both sides had fought for territory and resources countless times. A few hundred years ago, these two great empires had started a war with hundreds of upper sky warriors because of the ownership of a mountain. What kind of situation would a battle between hundreds of upper sky warriors look like? Of course, Qin Wushuang did not have the time to look back at the history. When he faced this stout man's passionate eyes and fanatical tone, Qin Wushuang felt that the seemingly generous promise from the Heavenly Lake Empire might not be as sweet as the legends said. When he saw Qin Wushuang did not speak, that stout man continued to instigate him. Marquis Wushuang, in the end, the Bayou country is only a subordinate country. Regardless of your strength and potential, you are only an upper sky warrior from a subordinate country. This stage will never be your final destination. If you join the Heavenly Lake Empire, you will face a completely different stage. Your value will be displayed perfectly, and your potential will be developed to the greatest extent. The stout man waved his hand, and one of his subordinates handed him a scroll. The stout man opened it generously, and it was a map of the Heavenly Lake Empire. Look, Marquis Wushuang, our emperor has promised this himself. As long as you say the word, you can pick any subordinate country. As long as you pick it. From now on, this subordinate country will be your private territory, and the hundreds of millions of people will be your people. And in the Heavenly Lake Empire, you will have the opportunity to enjoy the best conditions and the best resources. You will never have all of this in the Bayou country. Qin Wushuang allowed him to speak to his heart's content. Finally, he smiled lightly and did not even look at that map. Instead, he suddenly asked, Mister, I have a question, and I would like to ask you. What question? Please ask. I want to know, when a person dies, how big is the burial place? Why would Marquis Wushuang ask this question? This question varies from person to person. If it was a civilian, it would be the size of a straw mat. You can just dig a hole and bury him. If it was a royal, it would not be impossible to build an underground tomb like a maze. Yes, then regardless of the size of the underground tomb, a town should be enough, right? That stout man smiled apologetically. Of course, it would be enough. I am afraid it would not be enough to bury such a big place. Qin Wushuang nodded. Just as you said, I am afraid it would not be that big. Then regardless of how big the Heavenly Lake Empire is, or how big the Promised Territory is, to me personally, what meaning would it have? I only heard that even the bones need a place to be buried. The Qin family has lived in Eastwood Town for generations. Regardless of life or death, we are attached to this piece of land. It is difficult to move. Thus, although the things you have promised are wonderful, it is not what the Qin family wants." That stout man was stunned. Apparently, he did not expect that his eloquent words were not attractive in the eyes of the other party. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Since his head disciple had died in the Bayou country, he believed that in less than half a month, he would come to the Bayou. It was also not easy to deal with. Thus, I would advise Marquis Wushuang to think twice. Qin Wushuang knew that in the end, he still wanted him to go to the Heavenly Lake Empire. As the saying goes, one who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. For sure, he had appreciated Qin Wushuang. However, a dignified middle-ranking empire would definitely not fall short of Qin Wushuang. Promising him such great benefits and asking him to join the Heavenly Lake Empire, it was definitely not as simple as his potential. Qin Wushuang's lack of interest in worldly fame and power was, of course, one of the reasons for his refusal. His reluctance to part with the mystical land of the Great Song Mountains was, of course, another reason. However, the most important thing was that he was not hot-headed to that extent. He knew that behind this great benefit, there would be a big problem. In this world, there would not be a free lunch with only benefits and no conditions. Taking a step back, even if he was hot-headed and tempted by that great benefit, if he truly went to the Heavenly Lake Empire, he would not be familiar with the place and would have no foundation. How could he gain a foothold in this vast territory? What would he use to gain a foothold? Using the upper sky? In a middle-ranking empire, although there were not many upper sky warriors, they would not be a rare race. And abandoning the Bayou country would mean betraying the great Luo Empire and all the history and traditions of the Qin family. What he would lose would be the foundation that the Qin family already had, although these foundations were not strong. After all, they were deeply rooted at the foot of the Great Song Mountains. Even a slight movement would cause serious damage, not to mention moving everything away. In the Tianxian continent, betraying one's country could be said to be the most serious and most despised crime. Whoever betrayed the country to gain a position would not have a good reputation. Wherever he went, he must be mentally prepared to be looked at with strange eyes. Overall, although the benefits promised by the Heavenly Lake Empire were beautiful, this beauty was like a poisonous flower with thorns. The more beautiful it was, the more dangerous it would be. Qin Wushuang knew clearly that the most important thing for him now was not to pursue these worldly power, but to focus on the pursuit of martial arts. He could not relax at any moment. Of course, part of the other party's words were worth thinking about. For example, the Jiyin sect and Old Man Jiyin, the martial saint, and this lobbyist from the Heavenly Lake Empire had all mentioned that Old Man Jiyin had a surly personality and was the most protective. Thus, it would be a headache to deal with this Old Man Jiyin. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang said, "Mister, it seems that you are very clear about the movements in the Great Luo Empire. If that's the case, I will not keep you three. Starting from now, my royal Qin mansion will be under martial law to prevent Old Man Jiyin from invading." Qin Wushuang made up his mind and ordered the guest to leave. That stout man shook his head with a bitter smile. "Marquis Wushuang, if you insist on doing things your own way, I am afraid that your hard-earned foundation will be destroyed. How could you defend against that Old Man Jiyin with your martial law? The strength of a middle-stage warrior is far beyond what an initial-stage warrior like you could defend against. Even if you join hands with the martial saint from the Bayou country, I promise that you guys would not be able to deal with Old Man Jiyin for more than 3 moves." Although it was the truth, Qin Wushuang felt uncomfortable when he heard it. He said coldly, "You don't need to worry about this." That stout man sighed. "Too bad, too bad." Just when Qin Wushuang was about to speak, suddenly, a leisurely voice came from outside the door. There's nothing to feel sorry about. What is it? As soon as he said these words, Qin Wushuang was also moved inwardly. Upper sky presence. He could actually sense a trace of strong, sentient aura from the person's tone and the trajectory of the sound waves. Although this upper sky presence was also at the initial stage like him, it was also rich and powerful with an exuberant life force. A trace of coldness flashed across that stout man's eyes as a trace of viper-like light flashed across his eyes. He looked outside the door with caution. One of them appeared to be about 30 years old. He wore a clean long robe that was spotless. Although her face looked a little travel-worn, her clothes were clean and neat, and she looked smart and neat. It was impossible to tell that she was someone who was in a hurry. When this person stood there, he gave people a sense of profoundness like a deep pool. Even Qin Wushuang could not help but feel some admiration for this person. He could judge that regardless of the upper sky stage or strength, this person was at least 2 or 3 levels ahead of Li Wuji, who was also at the initial stage. In total, the spiritual martial force was divided into 4 stages: initial stage, middle stage, advanced stage, and the perfect stage. However, if one were to break it down, one would not know how many small stages there were in each stage. Each of these small stages was like a chasm. Separated by layers of power, it was impossible to break it down. He could only make some simple and direct comparisons. However, an upper sky realm warrior had some understanding of the details. Thus, Qin Wushuang judged that this person was more powerful than Li Wuji. It was not a random thought. When that stout man saw this person, clearly, he was also somewhat fearful. He said with a fake smile, "Since an important guest has arrived, I will not disturb you any longer and will leave first." After he had finished, he turned around and was about to leave with his 2 guards. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang said, "Hold on." That stout man was overjoyed as he thought that Qin Wushuang had changed his mind. He immediately looked back. Qin Wushuang rolled up his sleeves, and a strong wind rolled up that Heavenly Lake National Scholar Badge on the table. It drew a beautiful arc across the sky and shot over. "Take this with you." That stout man's expression was somewhat awkward as he grabbed it and put it in his sleeve. His entire body trembled from that remaining power, and his entire shoulder was numb to the point that he could not move. He forced a smile. "Okay, I will leave now." Just as he was about to walk out of the door, that guest stood at the door like a statue and stared at this stout man. "Mister, please make way." How could the stout man not see that this person was blocking his way on purpose? However, his mind was in a mess, and he only wanted to leave immediately. "Are you a lobbyist for the Heavenly Lake Empire?" The guest said lightly. I'm not a lobbyist. I just admire Marquis Wushuang a lot." "Really? Then what do you think of me?" A strange smile appeared on the corner of that guest's mouth. "You? Yes, if you can, why don't you introduce me to you?" With such excellent conditions, Marquis Wushuang was not tempted, but I am. That stout man looked at this uninvited guest in surprise. Apparently, he could not figure out what he meant. However, he was very clear about his upper sky presence. "What is their problem?" That guest frowned. "Haha, don't joke around. With your strength, you should have already become famous. Why are you making fun of me?" "Making fun?" That person's tone suddenly turned serious, and a sharp light shot out from his eyes. "You also know that this is making fun. Then, do you know which country you are stepping on?" "You." Finally, the stout man realized that the other party did not come with good intentions. A spy from the Heavenly Lake Empire dares to poach from a subordinate country of the Great Luo Empire. "Do you think it is necessary for you to leave today? Do you think it is possible for you to leave?" The stout man was shocked and gave a signal to the 2 guards on his left and right. However, his body bounced out of the door like a rubber ball. That guest only sneered and did not stop him. Instead, he allowed his meatball-like body to bounce out. After a moment, he stomped on the ground and chased after him as if he had disappeared from his original spot. "Marquis Wushuang, I am a guest from afar and do not want to kill people in your mansion. Allow me to go out and kill this bastard. I will visit you later." Qin Wushuang's heart moved. Inwardly, he was shocked and suspicious as he thought. Another upper sky. Who is this person? Could he be from the higher-ups of the great Luo Empire? P.S. Due to special reasons, today's update is late. Hopefully, there will be no blackout tomorrow, haha. Brothers, let's stop here for tonight. I believe that everyone can see that Qin Wushuang is about to step out of the Bayou country and onto a bigger stage. Let's not talk too much. Today, because of the blackout, the update is affected and I don't have many monthly votes. So, please send me a few. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 140. This accident did not bring any confusion to the Qin family. Qin Wushuang's choice had also received Qin Lianshan's support. Qin Lianshan had much deeper feelings for the land of Eastwood Town than Qin Wushuang. After all, he was born and raised here. Now, he was almost 50 years old. His attachment to this place was not something a young man like Qin Wushuang could compare with. As for those temptations, Qin Lianshan knew how to weigh them. He could also understand the reasoning that Qin Wushuang had thought of, not to mention that his son was already in upper sky. For sure, the future of the Qin family would be bright. Why would they give up what was near and seek what was far away and covet the riches of the Heavenly Lake Empire? Along the way, Qin Wushuang knocked down the 2 guards of that stout man. Then, he called out to his father and rushed outside. As soon as he walked out of the door, that guest from before had already returned with a smile. He was that lobbyist from the Heavenly Lake Empire. Marquis Wushuang. I came in a hurry. Please forgive me. Haha. That guest spoke first with magnanimity. No need to be so courteous. You are a guest from afar. Please sit inside. That person did not hold back and walked in. As the host and guest sat down, that person knew how to adjust the atmosphere as he introduced himself. My surname is Liu, and I come from the great Luo Empire. Marquis Wushuang. You can call me Emissary Liu. Emissary Liu? Yes, Marquis Wushuang. Indeed, heroes come from the young. Not only do you have outstanding strength and astonishing talent, you are also young and calm. You are not moved by wealth and glory. The Heavenly Lake Empire was so despicable. Fortunately, Marquis Wushuang was not tricked by him. What the Heavenly Lake Empire promised you, how could the great Luo not provide? Marquis Wushuang, to tell you the truth, I am here under the orders of the 5 palace masters to invite you to the Stargaze Palace. Stargaze Palace? Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was shocked. He had heard of the Stargaze Palace before. He knew that it was the #1 powerhouse in the great Luo Empire. It was the same as the Zhen Wu holy place in the Bayou country. Absolute authority would not allow anyone to question it. Marquis Wushuang, are you interested? Emissary Liu asked with a smile. Qin Wushuang had no reason to refuse the invitation from the Stargaze Palace. Envoy Liu, may I know why the 5 great palace lords want me to be a guest? Emissary Liu laughed. Don't you know? In this martial arts student exam, your result was outstanding. You had suppressed all martial arts students within the great Luo Empire. Even the 5 palace masters were shocked by you. I'm afraid that the reason he invited you is because he wants to see the new genius of our great Luo Empire. I don't deserve to be called a genius. Qin Wushuang pondered. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked, May I ask, Emissary Liu, what is the status of the Jiyin sect in the great Luo Empire? Jiyin sect? Emissary Liu was stunned. Please enlighten me, Emissary Liu, Qin Wushuang said in a serious tone. The Jiyin sect is at best a second-rate sect. However, old man Jiyin was extremely difficult to deal with. Thus, many sects with decent strength were unwilling to incur his wrath. Over time, the Jiyin sect became very famous. Emissary Liu explained patiently. Then, he asked again, why did Marquis Wushuang suddenly ask about the Jiyin sect? Qin Wushuang gave a light sigh. Emissary Liu, did you not hear the rumors along the way? I was focused on nothing and did not hear anything. What? Could it be that old man Jean had tried a rope in Marquis Wu Shuang? Or did he threaten you? If that's the case, it would be easier. The Jean sect had colluded with the Redwood Mansion in the Bayou Country. Because I had unintentionally ruined their plan, old man Jean had sent his head disciple, Li Wuji, to slaughter the entire Qin family. Now, I'd already killed that Li Wuji. I think that old man Jean would come to cause trouble in the next step. With a solemn expression, Emissary Lu thought for a moment and nodded. Old man Jean has an eccentric personality. He would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Since you had killed Li Wuji, for sure, he would come. Indeed, Marquis Wu Shuang is exceptional. At such a young age, even Li Wuji, a famous upper sky warrior, had died at your hands. You are not simple. This is a matter of great importance. I must contact the 5 palace masters of the Stargaze Palace immediately and ask them to make a decision. Old man Jean has an eccentric personality. Unless the 5 palace masters step out, I am afraid that no one in the great Luo could stop him. There was a trace of fear in Emissary Lu's tone. Although Emissary Lu was a palace emissary of the Stargaze Palace, he was only at the initial stage of the spiritual martial force. Although he was slightly more powerful than Li Wuji, compared to an old devil like old man Jean, he was far inferior. Qin Wushuang himself was not afraid of old man Jean. He was more worried about the fate of the entire Qin family. After all, besides him, the other people of the Qin had no chance to deal with an upper sky warrior. However, he did not regret killing that Li Wuji. After all, regardless of whether he had killed Li Wuji, with old man Jian's personality, he would not let it go. He had sent Li Wuji to slaughter the entire Qin family. To such people, Qin Wushuang would never show mercy. Marquis Wushuang, don't worry. Although you and I are not old man Jian's opponent, I think he would not dare to not give face to the Stargaze Palace. Unless he did not want to live, or else, he would not dare to go against the will of the Stargaze Palace. This way, after I have sent out the message, I will stay here for a while and negotiate with that old man Jean when he comes. If he knows what's good for him, we will let this matter go. If not, you and me, plus the martial saint of the Bayou Country, we will be able to deal with him 3 against 1. This was the only feasible way at the moment. Only, this way, the Stargaze Palace would owe him a favor. With a bitter smile, Qin Wushuang ordered his subordinates to take care of Emissary Lu. Emissary Lu was an easygoing person and was not picky. He got along well with Qin Wushuang. And the Martial Saint had also returned to the Qin family from the Martial Saint Mountain after receiving Emissary Lu's letter. Naturally, with the 3 upper sky warriors together, they would have more confidence. In front of the Redwood Mansion, it was desolate. The door was also sealed. All the family guards and core members were also imprisoned. The rest of the non-core members had already been dismissed. Now, the once prosperous Redwood Mansion was in ruins. At night, a ghost-like figure dropped before the Redwood Mansion. Then, like a ghost, it disappeared into the mansion. After a moment, that figure floated out again with a trace of doubt in his eyes. How could this be? He looked at the seal on the door and fell in a deep thought. At this moment, a wave of clappers came from the street. An old man who was on night watch said with a hoarse voice, "The weather is dry. Be careful of the candles." Like a gust of wind, that black figure rolled over and floated to the side of that old man. He grabbed his throat and asked with a cold voice, "What happened at the Redwood Mansion? Where did everyone go?" "Royal Mansion? Red?" The Redwood King colluded with foreign enemies and was sentenced to death. The entire Redwood royal family was taken to the imperial capital. I heard that they were going to be beheaded. How many days have they been gone? 10 days. No. 8 days crack. After breaking the throat, that figure returned to the mansion eerily. He raised both of his hands, and with 2 whooshing sounds, a stream of air shot onto the 2 stone lions before the mansion. Hong! The 2 majestic stone lions were instantly turned into dust and ash. That black figure said with a malevolent tone, "Taken to the imperial capital? Beheaded? All right, let's go to the Qin family first. First, we will destroy the Qin family. Then we will go to the imperial capital to kill the people of the Redwood Mansion. Kill, kill, kill. This black figure was Old Man Ji-een, who had come from thousands of miles away. Now, he only had one thought, and that was to kill everyone related to this matter as a sacrifice to his beloved disciple, Li Wuji. He regretted that he had sent Li Wuji. He even regretted that he had taken in that trash, He Yuqian. If he had not coveted the Redwood King's connections and resources, how could he have suffered the pain of losing his disciple? When he thought here, Old Man Ji-een left the Redwood Royal City and headed towards the South Cloud State. With the map, it was almost effortless to find Eastwood Town. It was only the evening of the second day when he arrived at Eastwood Town. As the night approached, the residents of Eastwood Town had also finished their busy day and started to enjoy their dinner. However, they did not know that an invisible hand of death had already extended towards Eastwood Town. A haze covered the sky above Eastwood Town. Before the biggest inn in Eastwood Town, Old Man Ji-een stood at the door with an expressionless face. He raised his head and saw 4 golden signboards that read, Eastwood Inn. This Eastwood Inn was the property of the Qin family. The waiter inside rubbed his eyes. He seemed to have seen someone outside a moment ago. How come he had disappeared in a flash? Out of curiosity, he walked out. However, there was not a single shadow. He mumbled, "What the hell? There is someone here. How come he had disappeared in the blink of an eye? Who are you looking for?" A cold voice sounded from behind him. This voice did not seem to belong to a human. It did not have the slightest trace of human presence, as if it had come from a ghost from hell. It was eerie and terrifying. That waiter immediately turned around, and still, there was not a single shadow. Inwardly, he shuddered and ran towards a counter. He shouted with unclear voice, "Ghost, there's a ghost." There were many waiters inside, and they were all bustling about. The shopkeeper was calculating on the abacus at the counter. When he saw that waiter running in while crying like a ghost, he scolded, "You stinky kid, did you really see a ghost? Why are you crying? If you disturb the guests, I will slap you." "Ghost, there's really a ghost." Just when that shopkeeper was about to scold him, he glanced outside, and instantly he was stunned. His expression was one of astonishment and fear. He was tongue-tied and could not utter a single word. A figure like a ghost did not have a physical body at all. Instead, it floated like smoke, flowing like water and drifting by. "Are you looking for me?" Old Man Ji-een asked eerily. He raised his fingertip, and suddenly his entire body had congealed into a physical body. He drew a line with his fingertip. A wave of strange light shot out. In the next moment, that waiter's entire body exploded. A burst of blood rain sprayed out, and he turned into a pile of meat paste. He fell limply to the ground. This scene had instantly stupefied that shopkeeper. A strange gwa-gwa-gwa sound emerged from his throat. Instantly, he was petrified and scared silly. Old Man Ji-een moved his finger again. Another burst of blood rain and a pile of meat paste. Another one had been killed. Kill. He hated the Qin family and the entire Eastwood Town. Today, there is still a power outage. However, it came in the afternoon. Haha, let's not talk about it anymore. Still 4 chapters. As long as the electricity comes back, as long as I have time to write, as long as the computer is not broken, I will not find any excuse to slack off. Today, there are still 3 chapters. Blood is enough. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.